The county of Prince Edward is on traditional land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. We thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years, and we recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to the land. Today, the county of Prince Edward is still home to many First Nations and Métis people, and we are grateful to have an opportunity to meet here, work, and continue stewardship of this land. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone who's joining us electronically, and a special welcome to our additional staff joining us in a physically distant manner for this meeting of Council. Council is meeting in a physically distant manner at the Highline Hall in Wellington and District Community Centre to ensure that we are able to maintain a minimum of 6 feet distance between each other. Although it may be deceiving to look on the live stream, I can assure you that we are a safe distance apart. Members of Council and staff who are in attendance at Highline Hall should practice physical distancing for the duration of the meeting, including any recesses and after the meeting has been adjourned. Although Council is meeting in person again, the physical meetings are prohibited to the public at this time. It is necessary to maintain distancing and eliminate the gathering of large groups to protect staff, Council, and the public from the spread of COVID-19. Members of the public are still able to make deputations and comments to Council electronically. Tonight's agenda lists all the items before Council for consideration. The recommended motions on tonight's agenda are shown in boldface, and copies of the agenda have been posted on our website. This meeting is being live streamed, and a participation in the meeting proceedings will become part of the public record. The recording from the meeting will be published on the county's website immediately and can be viewed by selecting the streaming tab on the county's homepage at thecounty.ca. Under Agenda Item 8, there will be 2 comments from the audience today, and members of the public who wish to provide comments at future meetings can do so by contacting clerks at pecounty.on.ca to register. The maximum time allotted for comments is 30 minutes. Your name will be included in the Council minutes and form part of the public record posted to the county's website. Bylaws listed on this agenda provide the force of law to decisions of Council. Any matter decided today by either resolution or bylaw is final and cannot be revisited by Council until 4 regular meetings have expired without a 2/3 majority vote. In the event of a fire, please use the applicable exits in the Highline Hall or wherever you are tuning in from. And for those present this evening in Highline Hall, I could ask everyone to mute or turn off their phones. That will move us to item 3 on the agenda, confirmation of the agenda. Can I have a mover and a seconder for this, please? Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Prinzen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a Roberts-Prinzen motion that the agenda for the Council meeting of September 22, 2020 be confirmed.
Thank you. All those in favor? That carries. So we'll move to item 4, disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Does anybody have anything to declare? Seeing none, we will move to item 5, announcements. And I'll ask if anybody present has any announcements to make. Councillor St. Jean.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just like to remind everybody about the virtual town hall meeting that I'll be hosting Mayor Ferguson next Wednesday night. It'll be broadcast live on Eastlink Channel 10 and the Picton Kinsman YouTube channel, much the same format that Councillor McNaughton and I hosted about 6 weeks ago. Start time is 6:30 to 7 p.m. and the public is asked to submit questions ahead of time that hopefully Mayor Ferguson will be able to answer. And of course, any questions via email can be directed to the Mayor's Assistant, Karen Fergo, at kfergo@pecounty.on.ca, or you can call Shower Hall. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, I've got three proclamations to meet, but before I do that, I'd like to welcome Councillor McNaughton's daughter Nora, who's joining us and is getting a first-hand experience in municipal politics at a council meeting. Welcome, Nora. It's nice to have you here. I've got three proclamations I will read now. This is the first one. October 1, 2020 is National Seniors Day, and the proclamation is as follows. Whereas CARP is a national nonpartisan nonprofit organization with over 300,000 members committed to a new vision of aging for Canada, promoting social change that will bring financial security, equitable access to health care, and freedom from discrimination and ageism. And whereas CARP's mandate is to promote and protect the interests, rights, and quality of life for all Canadians as we age. And whereas the date of Tuesday, October 1st was selected to raise awareness and participate in the newly recognized National Seniors Day instituted by the federal government in 2011 to celebrate the continuing contribution of Canada's seniors. And whereas the contributions of the seniors of Prince Edward County have helped make our community a leading age-friendly community in Canada. Now therefore, I, Steve Ferguson, do hereby declare October 1st, 2020 as National Seniors Day in Prince Edward County. And this is dated the 22nd of September. Second one is October is Child Abuse Prevention Month. And this reads as follows. Whereas child abuse is a complex and ongoing problem in our society, affecting many children in Prince Edward County, and whereas every child is entitled to be loved, cared for, nurtured, and secure, and to be free from neglect, as well as from verbal, emotional, sexual, and physical abuse, and whereas Prince Edward County faces a continuing need to support community-based programs to prevent child abuse and neglect, and whereas it is the responsibility of every adult who comes in contact with the child to protect that child's unconditional right to a safe, nurturing childhood. And whereas Prince Edward County has dedicated individuals and organizations who work daily to counter the problem of child abuse and neglect and to help parents obtain the assistance they need. And whereas our community is stronger when all citizens become aware of child abuse and neglect prevention, and become involved in supporting parents to raise their children in a safe, nurturing environment. And whereas the residents of Prince Edward County celebrate children, our county's greatest resource and the community leaders of tomorrow. Now therefore, I, Steve Ferguson, Mayor of the Corporation of the County of Prince Edward, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2020 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in the County of Prince Edward and commend this observance of the citizens of the county, and that is dated today as well. And lastly, this is a proclamation for September 20 to 26, 2020 is Legion Week, and Councillor Maynard is here, and I'm going to ask her to say a few words after I read the proclamation. Councillor McMahon is also a member of the Legion. The proclamation reads as follows. Whereas Ontario Provincial Command of the Royal Canadian Legion represents 9 districts, which include 396 branches, 3 of which are in Prince Edward County. And whereas the Royal Canadian Legion is a non-profit organization assuming the responsibility of maintaining the tradition of remembrance of those who paid the supreme sacrifice by defending our great nation in past and present conflicts so that we as Canadians can live in the freedom that we enjoy today. And whereas the Royal Canadian Legion continues to support and represent our veterans, past and present, with many benefits as a result of the determination of our thousands of dedicated members at all levels of the organization. And whereas the Royal Canadian Legion branches across the province work together with their affiliated organization, the Ladies Auxiliary, to raise funds in support of the many programs within Ontario Command of the Royal Canadian Legion. And whereas, with millions of dollars being raised from branch and ladies auxiliary projects, the Legion supports numerous programs benefiting our veterans, seniors, and youth within our communities. And now, therefore, I, Steve Ferguson, Mayor of the Corporation of the County of Prince Edward, do hereby proclaim the week of September 20th to 26th, 2020, as Legion Week in the County of Prince Edward. I encourage all citizens to reflect upon the support and contributions the members of Royal Canadian Legion Branch 78, Picton, Royal Canadian Legion Branch 160 in Wellington, and Royal Canadian Legion Branch 509 in Consacon have made within Prince Edward County. I will now ask Councillor Maynard if she would like to add anything to the proclamation.
Thank you. On behalf of the County Royal Canadian Legions, Branch 78 Picton, Branch 160 Wellington, and Branch 509 Consacon, I would like to thank you for presenting this proclamation. I would especially like to thank all of my comrades and the Ladies Auxiliary for the many thousands of hours of volunteer work that allows our branches to generously give back to our community and beyond. Most importantly, to ensure the comfort of our veterans. Some examples locally, food banks, hospital, hospice, companion dogs for veterans off the streets, a program for homeless vets, Sunnybrook Hospital, seniors, programs locally and province-wide, youth education, and in general, just the comradeship of opening our doors for community events. Legion Week would generally be a very busy week for those of us in the Legion. I'd not likely be at this meeting tonight because virtually every night there would be something going on, honors and awards, special sporting events, but most importantly, and this year is going to be obviously, most things will not occur, but our dinner is kind of our dinner for our veterans would be the culminating activity for this week. I would just like to say that as our Poppy campaign starting at the end of October, which is the major fundraiser for the Legions, not only locally, provincially, but across the country, are going to be challenged. We're not sure, how much or what we will be able to do. So I would encourage anybody locally that would normally put money in a Poppy box, sometimes I've seen people do it more than once, to contact their local branches, one of the 3 branches in the county, to arrange to make a donation, because it really is the core fundraiser of our organization, and the smaller branches will struggle through this through the restrictions, but we have a mandate and we are going to find some way to do it. But we're just asking for your support every day, but especially during the Poppy campaign that starts the end of October. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll now move to item number 6 on the agenda, adoption of minutes. Item 6.1, if we could have a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Margetson, seconded by Councillor Forrester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a Margetson-Forrester motion that the council minutes from the meeting held on September 1st, 2020 be adopted as presented.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. 6.2, have a mover, a seconder, please. Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor McMahon.
This is a Bailey McMahon motion that the planning committee meeting minutes, that the planning committee minutes from the meeting held on August 26, 2020 be adopted as presented.
Thank you. Any questions? I'll see none. All those in favor? And that carries. We'll go to item 6.3. Mover and a seconder for this, please. Councillor Forrester, seconded by Councillor Prinzen.
Mr. Mayor,
Read
it's
that,
a Forrester
please.
Prince motion that the planning committee minutes from the meeting held on September 9th, 2020 be adopted as presented.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, all those in favor? And that carries. Moves us to item 7, deputations, and we have 2 this evening. The order has been altered. No, I'm sorry, it hasn't. It's comments from the audience. So we've got Dwayne Stacy regarding Child Abuse Prevention Month. Dwayne, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing the opportunity to present some information this evening that hopefully can further bring some context and some understanding to Council's proclamation that was just endorsed this evening surrounding Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Okay, thank you.
for October.
Just a reminder, Paul, or Dwayne, you've got 10 minutes.
Yes, thank you. All right, I'm going to share my the presentation. So I'm just going to share my screen, so hopefully all council members will be able to see. All right, share. Oops. Okay. So hopefully that's fine for everyone in council. Yes. Okay.
Yep.
My screens. All right, I apologize. It's not seeming to progress sharing my screen, so I will stop sharing. Sorry about that. I apologize for that delay. So hopefully members of council have had an opportunity to see some of the information. So as was mentioned, October is Child Abuse Prevention Month, and really we appreciate the opportunities provided by, an example, this evening Town Council, to allow us to share information to help raise awareness about the important role that the community plays in the prevention of child abuse and neglect. And to provide some context, within the 3 counties that Highland Shores Children's Aid serves, from the 2016 census, there was over 38,000 children approximately in the 3 counties, and approximately 5.6% of those children come to the attention. We become aware about concern about child well-being and safety. And so that's, just over 2,100 children each and every year coming to our attention. A significant change in 2018 with the Child Youth Family Services Act that governs our work is raising the age of protection for 16 and 17-year-olds to also be included in concerns about their safety and well-being, and how that we as a Children's Aid Society could become involved. Those arrangements with those youth that are age 16 and 17 are voluntary in nature. And so they tend to be, and then the period 2018-19, we entered into with these youth, 10 of those youth entered what was called Voluntary Youth Services Agreement. The next slide that you would have seen in the presentation really starts to speak about how families become involved with the Children's Aid Society. And I know when most people hear and think about Children's Aid Societies, they think about the physical and sexual abuse, which under our spectrum code is called physical sexual harm by commission. But when you look at the slide on the left-hand point, is really the reality that many more children and youth are coming to our attention surrounding caregiver capacity, emotional harm, separation from a caregiver. And really what that's speaking to in all those 3 categories is, challenges that families are having and being unable to sort of meet the children's physical, emotional needs. And some of the challenges we know, and this council, I think, heard through other presentations in the past, include mental health concerns, addictions, social isolation, trauma, and extreme financial stress. And I think everyone can appreciate this current period we're in as is really just increasing a lot of those pressures that families and children and youth are experiencing currently. What I also wanted to highlight, and there's another chart that really, when we start to talk about for 2019-20, we had over 3,900 child protection intakes. And of that number, 61% were deemed requiring services. So that could be that we had to look into the matter further to understand, or that we're linking families, because again, thinking about what I was speaking to, is that they're coming to us because of mental health addictions issues. We're making linkages with community partners. And so of that 3,900 and the 61% that come to our attention, over 1,350 families were assessed for concern about their children, and then 637 of those families were provided with ongoing services. But an important thing to keep in mind when we think about the families we're working with is that of all the number we're serving is 93% of them were working with the family, the children and youth within their family homes. And we did some analysis last year looking at, again, when we looked at all of our admissions for 2019, over 43% were made up, speaking to that sort of caregiver capacity. And so we need to think about the complexity of the needs of the children. And a lot of times children are entering care, not so much due to the parents and their sort of parenting issues, but due to lack of services available in coming to the Children's Aid Society. And when you look at the next pie chart, this is really the importance about who's reporting and why we want to continue to try to raise awareness, is that you can see that, between parents, family members, other relatives, that's, 25% of the referrals that come to the Children's Aid Society are from family. A significant proportion is from educational personnel, so that's schools, daycares, over 15%, and law enforcement is 23%. And again, that would make sense thinking of some of the situations we're talking about, that in the 24-hour nature of law enforcement, similar to the Children's Aid Society, that they're going to come across situations and with their obligations to report. Same with educational personnel, their requirements to report when they see concerns of child abuse and neglect. So it's really important that we get that information out there through presentations such as this, through support of council. The more people that can be aware that when you see concerns, that we all as adults in the community, so not if your professional obligation, but also just as adults and people in the community, concerned people, that encourage families, encourage people to make calls to the Children's Aid Societies when there's concerns about abuse and neglect. Okay. So I think really I highlighted quickly is that, I think we understand the impacts of the pandemic that's presenting many challenges and creating potentially new or different issues for families to manage. And some of the things we're already seeing are financial stress, the impacts of isolation, and a limited ability to access services. I think as this is all new experiences for all of us in the community, and how we're trying to manage together and trying to make sure we're working within public health guidelines. But we have really switched our services to returning back to more in-person service using appropriate PPE and things like that. And we're also expecting, because we know for a period of time, as you saw, one of our bigger sources that provide information about concerns about child abuse and neglect, when schools weren't in place. So we're seeing schools returning and back, that we do see through the combination of all the stresses, the pressures, that we do expect there will be more calls and concerns, and a role for Highland Shores Children's Aid to play in trying to help families manage those concerns and trying to engage them and provide ways to assist them in meeting and addressing some of those needs. I know, because I've been to council previously, there's been always questions about what's that volume for Prince Edward County. And so this last chart shows all the families by region and the service being provided. And so when you look at that chart, the majority of the service is through the larger communities, thinking of Hastings County, followed by Northumberland, and then Prince Edward County at almost 10% of the families that we're involved with and working with. So to wrap up and to speak about what can you do, and I think, as I mentioned already, is I think reaching out to friends, families, and neighbors, ensure that they're coping, managing well during this time period in particular. If there are worries and concerns, to have someone contact the Children's Aid Society if there's a concern about child safety, abuse, or neglect. I think another important role that council plays is just through these proclamations, and I know there's a lot of other initiatives and activities that you're supporting within the community to try to support families, to remove some of the barriers. And I know historically there's been presentations and work done and recognition around issues around food insecurity and housing stability. And how can you make a difference is Tuesday, October 27th is the specific day that's recognized in the province of Ontario during Child Abuse Prevention Month. It's called Dress Purple Day. And you can purchase t-shirts from our foundation, and phone number for the foundation, 613-962-9291. And you can just be directed to the foundation or the childrensfoundation.ca. And really just encouraging everyone to speak up for kids, use your voice, keep them safe and well cared for. And and I'd like to thank you for your support this evening and allowing me this opportunity to present information.
Thanks very much, Dwayne.
Thank you.
Just hang tight while I see if there are any members of council with questions. I see one hand. I just want to remind members of council that last year we were given purple pins, and if you still have them, October 1 is when you can put them on your lapel. Councillor McNaughton.
Thank you. Hi, and thank you for your deputation again. It's often a very heartbreaking deputation. So, but sometimes there are little signs for hope. One of the good news stories last year, we heard about voluntary youth services agreements, but I was just wondering if you could qualify the type of care that entails, whether that would be a home to live in, or a group home to live in, or some financial support. What would that potentially include?
So the voluntary youth services agreements, it's a youth-driven plan. And so we're really working with where the youth is at, what support they need. And it could be any of those examples you just mentioned. It can just be sometimes financial support. They need that assistance to support them with housing, their living situation. It could be helping to connect them with other community services. It can be a lot of times because those youth may themselves be struggling with some of the issues I talked about earlier, mental health, addictions. And so sometimes that causes strain with their parents. So sometimes we're working to assist them in reconnecting with their parents. And sometimes it involves them, what you would consider when you think of Children's Aid Society in the in-care side, that we would provide a residential resource for them. So it is a mixture for all those youth. It really is based on their plan.
Thank you. And can I, one more?
Follow up.
So, and you mentioned, where is it, that a number of situations where children came into care for reasons that didn't have anything to do with child protection concerns, but related to lack of service. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? And does it point to a lack of services available to families in our region, or are there sort of broken lines between the dots of service provision?
Yeah, I don't want to come across, hopefully it's not coming across as a blame. There's a lot of good work happening with our community partners.
Yeah.
This is really sometimes about that there's gaps in our service system to meet the needs. Like we have organizations that are providing specific services, and sometimes a child and family's need may be outside of what the service they provide. And so without getting too technical, there are mechanisms we have to work within our ministry and our partners to find support for that. Sometimes that's funding, sometimes that's finding a resource that's outside of our 3 communities. And so we work together with our community partners, and it's through a complex special needs process typically. So we continue to work with our community partners to try to identify, and there's recognition that there are gaps within our community. There's a number of planning tables where we're working cooperatively to look at these issues and try to plan. And there's also engagement with government, with the ministry.
Thank
So
you.
both our ministry, Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, and now Ministry of Health as well.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Roberts.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. Just going back to the pie chart that references 9%. What is that 9% of in terms of actual quantum? Is it
So when we
9%?
mentioned,
Yeah.
when I was mentioning overall the 637 families we're dealing with, that'd be 9% potentially are from Prince Edward County, or just I'll round it off the math, say 10%. So you're looking somewhere, any day we're working with, or any given day we're working with 60 plus families in Prince Edward County.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dwayne? No, if I could have a mover and a seconder to receive the deputation, please. Councillor Margetson, seconded by Councillor McNaughton.
This is a Margetson-McNaughton motion that the deputation by Dwayne Stacy, Highland Shores Children's Aid, regarding October being Child Abuse Prevention Month be received.
Thank you. All those in favor? If I could have a mover and a seconder to receive the deputation. And that carries. Thank you very much, Dwayne.
Okay, thank you. Good evening.
So we'll now move to second deputation. C.J. Thompson, founder and chief executive officer of Tenacity Capital. C.J., you there? I see you there. You there?
Here. I'm here.
Okay, welcome. Just a reminder, CJ, I think you're familiar with the drill. You've got 10 minutes.
Sure. Well, good evening. Thank you for having me. It's no secret why I'm here. I'm seeking municipality's support for our sublease on the marine operations to be ratified this evening. But I felt it might be important to just touch on quite briefly kind of who Tenacity is and why we've ended up here today, this evening, looking at this sublease. And I kind of broke it out into 6 key points. And the first one is partnership. So we wanted to, when we first started Tenacity, we were really interested in creating rural opportunity and revitalization. That's our sole game. 100% of what we do is in rural, and especially right here at home in Prince Edward County. So we have successful partnerships with the federal government, Canadian universities, such as a university in Toronto that has the #1 university incubator in the world, and that is a pipeline through which we can facilitate connections into rural Canada, and again in Prince Edward County. And we also have partnerships with major institutions such as Scotiabank, and everything revolves around rural, and like I said, currently at this time, Prince Edward County. So what we found is communication is key in all of these partnerships, and that is something we will carry forth with hopefully a partnership with Prince Edward County, and focusing on the municipality, key staff, and what's best for the community with the community's needs. The next thing we're focused on is solutions. Nothing happens without a solution. And if I can just read something verbatim that we came across a few years ago, and it's a downtown revitalization action plan for Picton. Again, reading that created a solution in our minds that we've approached you with. And in that, it says the proposed partnership fulfills the goal of increasing waterfront activities and amenities through a partnership on marina operations. That's verbatim. And that really stuck with me when I read it. And I approached the leadership in municipality of Prince Edward County about this in 2017, and I proposed this solution back then. So we've been almost 4 years working diligently at this, and as far as I know, we're the only ones that have actually come to the table. And I'm really excited about what we have, and I really hope this evening yields something there. The third thing that we focus on is, of course, revitalization. The current state of the municipality financially does not quite lend itself towards capitalizing the projects required on the harbor, and certainly these operations of this marina. And that's a challenge for everyone. And I think we've addressed this in our proposal and the sublease, where Tenacity is essentially, we're removing this annual deficit that occurs through attempting to operate this property. And in turn, not only are we alleviating that financial pain, we are moving forward and creating a vibrant community and capitalizing the entire project. So we're excited about that, and we think that's that shouldn't go unnoticed here, simply for the fact that the community needs it. The next thing is stewardship. We have been stewards of not only investor capital from local investors and outside investors, we are stewards of federal government programming for rural, and even we're stewards of the property that we do own at 35 Bridge Street that I think the community really needs to see something happen. And I don't think any of us are in a disagreement about that. We may own the property, but it's kind of on our shoulders to really utilize this situation and make the best of it for everybody, because it's been sitting dormant for decades. So I think what we'll do next is stewardship's going to be really important, for example, when it comes to not just communication with the municipality, but with the Cooney Conservation. That's going to be paramount. What we do is essentially going to be guided and governed by the Cooney Conservation, and we're just going to utilize that to make this a vibrant place for the entire community, and meet their standards. The fifth thing I think we can touch on is Tenacity is huge on connectivity. In our own sense, connectivity is having relationships with post-secondary institutions in the larger urban centers, where usually there's a mass out-migration of youth from our community, and they're all headed for greener pastures, and they leave Prince Edward County. Now we're creating a place for that youth to stay in Prince Edward County and thrive, and we're connecting them to the #1 incubator in the world and other institutions in urban, and they can have that connection to the urban economy, which directly meets our thesis as an organization. And I don't think the marina and the waterfront is any different. Connectivity in that sense works along the lines of the community having better access to amenities, and the retail, the commerce part of the community actually has connections to enhance public access and tourism. So I think we're going to be the ones to connect those dots. So connectivity is very key for local commerce to be connected to this harbor, which is a gateway to other communities. And then the final thing that's perhaps most important is we have become, with all of our investment activities in rural entrepreneurs and business, and focused on important partnerships that we can make for the purpose of rural communities. I think we've become pretty good at spotting leadership and talent. And I really just wanted to make note and recognize Todd Davis and Emily Cowan and their whole team, because they've been absolutely wonderful to work with. They've been completely efficient, and I think especially the past 6 months, given what everybody's had to deal with, they've done a marvelous job. And I think having them represent our community as staff is just going to be a wonderful thing. So those are kind of just 6 key attributes that I think we need to focus on so we can work together on this, because it really is a partnership. And I'm excited to move forward and see what else the community has for ideas, and to work closely with staff and the municipality so that we can continue to build this thriving community. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, CJ. We'll see if any members of council have any questions. Anybody? Councillor Margetson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and hello, CJ, and thank you for the deputation and for your proposal and engaging with the municipality. I appreciate that, and you know that your patience and efforts in getting this agreement to where it is. The only question I have, and it's related to the municipality still being responsible, or the landlord, which is the municipality, or the taxpayer, responsible for the maintenance and repair of the capital assets. So over the next 10 years, the taxpayer would be responsible for those repairs and maintenance. And I'm wondering, so right now the agreement speaks to the $1 a year, and I appreciate that you're taking our operating deficiencies away and seeking a new business venture, and I appreciate that. I wondered if you would at all be interested if we did an asset management plan to see what our costs over the next 10 years would be in negotiating some rent to offset the taxpayer cost to upgrade those assets when they are required to be maintained or repaired. And it speaks to certain things in the agreement. So that's the only sticking point for me. I think the agreement's very good in a lot of ways, and I thank you for working with us, but I just want to ask you if that is something that you would be interested in negotiating if we knew what our asset management costs would be over the next 10 years to negotiate some kind of a rent to offset those costs to the taxpayer. Thank you.
CJ?
Thank you for the constructive question, and I understand certainly where you're coming from. When we broke this down as an organization, we went very deep. We've been at this for years, like I said. So we broke down costs of maintenance and all those scenarios, and we have that information. And for us, the key item that really was kind of hanging over the heads of the municipality, we found it wasn't actually the maintenance and upkeep. It was actually the operations, the M&R 10% gross was a large concern when we looked at it, because the M&R as the lessee or the lessor on the head lease, they're claiming a 10% gross fee on everything. And from fuel sales are the majority of the sales in this enterprise, and just on fuel, you're not even going to be able to net a margin of 10%. So right from the get, as a municipality, we were at a major disadvantage every single year. So for us, it was operations that were the biggest issue, and that's why we chose to take this route, because that was just the best thing that we could see for the community, and we knew that maintenance was going to be a smaller aspect to all of this, especially because we are, in a sense, moving forward. Hopefully, Tenacity as operators will be maintaining most of the property, other than the few of the assets listed, And again, we found that was a smaller aspect to this enterprise, and this is why we chose the route we did.
Okay. Follow up?
Just to follow up. So if we did get a better understanding of what our asset management costs would be in the next 10 years, would that be something you would be interested in reviewing with the municipality prior to the execution of this agreement? My concern is that the taxpayer would be responsible for those costs when we're renting that marina to a private operation. So, and I mean, I understand there could be a negotiation point here, but I'm asking that to see if you're interested, or if the $1 a year for 10 years is where you're at.
I think we've bitten off a big chunk here. It's a lot to chew on when you understand the economics of the uphill fight on this property. And I've been very clear that I'm empathetic to the municipal staff attempting to operate this property with what they have to work with. And so I don't know economically if I can. This is already, if I'm lucky, it's a break-even enterprise as it is. I don't know how much further we can go as an operation to take on an additional call it charge on maintenance of assets when we're already we are committing to capitalize in the asset as a whole with potentially new structure and other things. I mean, that's the other aspect here is worked into my financial plan on this project is not only the capitalization of a new marina, but upgrading the municipal property and upgrading that as an asset. I think between alleviating the financial stress annually on the municipality, as well as the capital that we will be putting into the property on an ongoing basis, I don't know if we can go any further to take on the maintenance of those assets.
Councilor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. CJ, I also thank you for the deputation and for your patience and diligence to get us to this point. I was struck this evening by the number of times you mentioned the word partnership in your deputation and in your responses. And good for you. I mean, good for you for Tenacity to be approaching this as a partnership with not only the county but with Quinte Conservation. And also good for you to be perhaps modeling an approach for others in terms of 3P solution to some of our challenges when it comes to the possibility of successful private-public partnerships. So it's, from my point of view, CJ, you've done a great job, and I join with others that appreciate that you've also recognized our county staff in Todd and Emily, who were key to getting us to this point too. So thank you for that.
Councilor Maynard.
Thank you. Thank you, CJ, for your deputation. And I'll preface my questions with I am, in principle, in support of this lease, but I have a few questions. You would have noticed in the last meeting that I brought up the trees. There are several prominent hardwood trees on that location, and I would say that they are part of our asset to that property. They're just now starting to show their colors really quite lovely and provide shade. I'm just wondering, would you be agreeable to a clause that would require you to get written permission before altering any of the trees on the site because you talk about respecting the natural habitat. So I'm just wondering if that, I didn't see that in the rewrite of the agreement. Just wondering if that would be something you would be agreeable to.
I would certainly be agreeable to working with the right, call it committee or agency that would have the most input on that conversation. I do want what's best for the community here, and if that's an agency that represents the community's interests, I'm happy to work with that entity. We are very, very big on sustainability. That is a large part of our platform, so I'd be happy to have those conversations.
So I guess I'm asking if you would be agreeable to having something formal in the lease that, you know, just something simple that any altering of trees on site would require written permission by the county, and that then could take whatever path to whatever committee or whatever consultation was necessary.
I would certainly be willing to have that language in the lease working in concert with the right agency, so that we can move quickly. You know, what I'd love to do is move forward to make this a beautiful, vibrant place for everybody. And as long as we have a process by which I can do that in the quickest means possible, in the community's best interest, whatever the entity is, I would have that in the lease. Yes.
Okay, and if I could
Follow up?
Yes. Again, on the stewardship, so you talk a lot about a partnership or consultation with Quinte Conservation to ensure public access to the shoreline is optimized, the amenities, respecting natural heritage through lighting, seating, and environmental preservation measures as guided and governed by Quinte Conservation. Now, some of these stewardship measures that you talk are really outside of Quinte Conservation, although they do have expertise in some of those areas. So have you formally engaged with Quinte Conservation to discuss a partnership, or them working with you in concert to make the best stewardship use of that property? Or are you just talking about applying for the necessary permits when required?
So we have already engaged, and we've already engaged Quinte Conservation in the past. They have approved our full plans for the waterfront, everything, and they're very pleased with the solution that we have. In addition to that, we went extra lengths to hire marine construction company that's done projects all around the world, and they have won numerous environmental and sustainability awards. That was a prerequisite for us, for sure, was to make sure we cover that basis. And although we're using, by the way, a world-class global company that's won all these awards, they're going to be using local labor to do their installation process. So to answer your question, yes, we have engaged Quinte Conservation. They know exactly what we're doing. We had plenty of conversations around waterfront sustainability, and they signed off, and they're happy. So we're happy.
So, and I will ask for a response to that. I would suggest that is not the case, that although there was a permit requested for some docking and boardwalks, years past, which has now expired, there has been no, on this particular proposal, it's my understanding that that there hasn't been any conversation, that there hasn't been any request for review. I mean, Quinte Conservation is always happy to work with any developer to provide review and provide comments or development proposals. But I just find it somewhat disingenuous that you're using their name under stewardship when that consultation has yet to occur.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful observation, because, and I can see your concerns. We do not have any direct plans to affect the waterfront shoreline of the municipal property. Everything we have planned for our property that we own has been run through Quinte Conservation. But no, we have no plans currently to affect the direct shoreline of the municipal property. So that's why we have not taken that to Quinte Conservation. Anything we do on the municipal property, we have not applied for permits or anything to that matter because we have not had full municipal support to this point. And it's been kind of I found it would be preliminary to go to Quinte Conservation if we don't have the support. That's more a stage 2 effort if we choose to do anything with the direct waterfront of the municipal property. But again, for our property, we definitely have everything we need, and we've received support from Quinte Conservation.
Councillor McNaughton.
Does that make sense? I want to be clear about that.
Councillor McNaughton.
Thank you. Hi, CJ. Thank you. I would join other councillors in their sentiments about your compliments to our staff members. I think we're very lucky to have them, and would join you in those sentiments. They're pretty special. You've mentioned several times what your vision to improve the property is. Can you go into any specifics so that the community can hear straight from you what you are thinking about for that particular property? When you and I first spoke about this, I think probably in January, you did mention that you wouldn't be increasing the footprint of the building. Are you thinking about adding other structures to the site? Are you thinking about anything specific that would add structures of any sort, or would remove any green space or anything to that effect?
Yeah, so I would be very excited to talk about this stuff. I don't want to overshadow what we're here for today, but I can tell you it would be a vibrant place for community. There will be boardwalk, some form of shopping and leisure on the boardwalk alongside the building. There will eventually, I will be planning a new structure, and I can definitely tell you green space will very much be a part of our construction process and layout. I would say at least as much green space as what's there already. And I mean, it's usable active green space, we'll call it. And this is definitely, we're gearing up for a 4-season property, a place for everybody to come even during the winter months. Other than that, I'll refrain from getting into too many details, but I'm happy to have that conversation at a later date too.
Okay. All right. Any other questions of CJ? Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder to accept the deputation, please? Councillor St. Jean, seconded by Councillor Prinzen.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question, please?
Oh, sorry, Brad.
Sorry, who? Sorry, Brad, didn't see you back there.
That's okay.
Councillor
I just have-
Nyman.
I just have one question. Am I good to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Moore. CJ, I just want to kind of understand it a bit. How many slips are you looking at putting in there? And are they for local people, or are you trying to attract more tourism?
Thank you, Councillor Nyman. It's a great question, and it's an important question. We've been approved for, I believe it's 68 slips. They range in sizes from the smallest boat into, we could take a up to a 70-foot vessel in certain spots. And so we're really not ruling anybody out. This is definitely going to be a marina for locals. I get several calls a week, and many of them are locals looking for space to dock their boat, and I'm happy to have them. It'll be I can tell you we're gonna have a bit of a juggling match the first few years, deciding on how many seasonal slips to roll with versus transient. We don't want to rule out transient boats that do come in on a regular basis. So it's very much a community marina. And regarding tourism, it will be a tourist attraction. However, I think that it's more just adding, the competency to be able to accept incoming boats and travelers by water rather than down Highway 49. I think it works in everybody's favor. And we've had a marina here before, but this marina will just be a far more sustainable model and a more vibrant community space for the community. That really is the key here. So yes, we will have some tourist attraction, but for the most part, we've had some level of attraction down there before, and this is a more robust infrastructure to be able to accommodate the synergies between the local boaters, the retail shops, and the tourists to be able to work in harmony.
Okay. Got that, Councilor Nyman?
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Madam Clerk, we had a mover and a seconder, Councilor St. Jean, and who was the seconder?
Councillor Prinzen.
We need a seconder.
Prinzen.
Councilor Prinzen.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is the St. Jean Prinzen motion that the deputation by C.J. Thompson, founder and chief executive officer of Tenacity Capital, regarding item 9.2, supplemental report to council regarding updates to Picton Marina draft sublease with Tenacity Capital be received.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much, CJ.
Thank you.
So we'll move to item number 8, comments from the audience, and we have two, Paul Greer and Neil DeRuyter. And Paul Greer is up first, talking about item 9.2. Paul, are you there?
Oh, yes. Yep.
Oh, there you go. Okay, just to welcome and thanks for attending. Just a reminder, you've got 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, for allowing me to speak. My name is Paul Greer, and I'm here representing the Greer family regarding our piece of property of 116 acres that runs north of the Millennium Trail, Part Lot 199, 200, Village of Wellington. Property has been in our family since 1925. It's the past site of the Greer Canning Company and our farm, which was operated until 1981. I'm here concerned with the new interim control bylaw for Wellington. Half of our property was already subject to an interim control bylaw between 2016 and 2018. Now staff want the other half to be subject to another IBC. So instead of the appointment land portion being under the interim control bylaw, the other half would be, but it's all one property. The whole property is ours. We are in the process of selling the property. The developer interested in investing in the community. The interim control bylaw would potentially result in the deal falling through. The developer's planner had been dealing with the county staff since February of this year. June 25th of this year, buyer made an offer. July 2nd, we accepted a conditional offer. September 24th, the conditions were to be waived of the sale and the sale to close in the end of October. Passing another bylaw does not seem fair, especially given what we've already gone through with the previous bylaw. Funny, we are here tonight, 2 days before the conditions are to be waived, dealing with another interim bylaw. For me, what is exactly is the intent of the bylaw and why is it needed? I would just like that explained to me fully. It seems to us that staff may not like or want the current secondary plan for Wellington. Beyond affecting us directly, what are the costs to taxpayers to potentially have to go through another extensive planning process for Wellington that was finished only 5 years ago? What message does this send to those who want to build, invest in Wellington? We can only speak to our property, but this is the second investor who has encountered challenges and frustrations to the point they've decided to invest elsewhere. Where's the fairness in this approach? How many other properties have been subject to 2 interim control bylaws in a period of less than 2 years? This is an important piece of property right in the middle of town. It is closer to the water and sewage plant than any other property being developed at this time. The proposal is to run water, sewer up Clemenson Street, down the Millennium Trail. This would result in 100% of the cost to run services right in front of our property with the zero return if this property is prevented from being sold or developed. The Greer family are not developers. As long as we own the land, it will not be developed. This will result in no serviced employment land in Wellington. We are asking to not impose another interim control bylaw on our property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. See if anybody's got any questions. Members of council? Seeing none. Thanks very much, Paul.
Thank you.
And our second comment comes from Neil DeRuyter, also talking to item 9.2. Neil, are you there?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name's Neil DeRuyter. I'm a planner with MHBC Planning. I'm here to speak tonight on behalf of the Greer family. I'll keep my comments very brief and supplement what Paul just mentioned. But I think that from my perspective, the key question that council needs to satisfy themselves with is what exactly is the intent of the bylaw?
Neil, 1 second, please. Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Neil, if you could just pause your YouTube. We're getting the sound feedback. Is that, or is that Paul's?
I think it's Paul's computer.
Okay.
Paul? 1 second, please. Madam Clerk? Neil, you there?
Yeah, I apologize, Mr. Mayor. I think Paul left his computer on, so that's why it was reverberating there. Sorry to hear me twice.
Okay,
So
just a reminder, you've got 3 minutes.
Perfect. I don't hear any bad feedback, so I think we're okay. My name's Neil DeRuyter. I'm a planner from MHBC here on behalf of the Greer family. I won't take up too much of your time. I'll supplement many of Paul's comments. The key question from my perspective that council should satisfy in deciding on this interim control bylaw is what exactly is the intent of it and why is it needed? This bylaw doesn't just temporarily prohibit development for 1 or 2 years. From my perspective, and more significantly, it would provide the planning tool to substantially redo the Wellington secondary plan. I think the important thing too is the Wellington secondary plan is not outdated or irrelevant. It was approved only 5 years ago. It had extensive community and landowner consultation. It had several steering committee meetings, special council meetings, open houses, an external consulting team, and it also involved the review of and approval of the province. And probably the most important fact was it wasn't appealed. The landowners didn't appeal. and it came into effect in 2015. So from my perspective, the question has to be, why do staff feel that the 2015 plan is no longer relevant and has to be reviewed using such a drastic planning tool such as an interim control bylaw? The county already has planning tools in place to appropriately review and assess development proposals. Any of the vacant land north of the trail has to prepare a master plan to address servicing, road improvements, and land use. Such a plan has to be prepared by the developer and is subject to county review and approval, as well as community consultation. The most recent staff reports on the other subdivision applications in Wellington explicitly recognize this, and further state that developers have to enter into servicing agreements with the county, including funding arrangements prior to development. The Wellington Secondary Plan requires that the county establish proper planning justification and demonstrate the need to review land use policies when considering an interim control bylaw. And it's not clear from my perspective from the staff reports how that's been satisfied. Lastly, I think I'd ask council to consider why the county would potentially turn its back on a new secondary plan that was only approved in 2015, that was subject to a multi-year review process, adopted by county council, approved by the province with no appeals. Any future changes that may result as a result of the interim control bylaw to the secondary plan may not end up with that same outcome. And with that, Mr. Mayor and Council, I thank you for giving me the time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil. See if any hands go up. Anybody have any questions for Neil? No? Nobody. Thank you very much, Neil, for coming forward this evening and making your comments.
Thank you very much.
Could I have a mover and a seconder to accept the comments? Councillor Margetson, seconded by Councillor Bailey.
Margetson Bailey motion that the comments from the audience be received.
Okay, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. So we'll move to item 9.1 under items for consideration. The report of community services. If we could have a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor, please. Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor McMahon.
This is a Bailey McMahon motion that council receive report CSP 50-2020 for information, that council approve the draft sublease allowing Tenacity Capital to operate the Picton Marina, and that council permit staff to enter into conversations with Tenacity Capital should Wellington Marina become available to sublet to a third party.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? Councillor Bailey, we'll start with you.
Director Davis, thank you for where you're sitting. It's easier for me to do this. I wanted to build on something that Councillor Margetson asked and that Councillor McNaughton brought up. On page 72, I've got repair and maintenance. The landlord as owner.
You're going to have to speak into the microphone.
Sorry. The landlord as owner of the capital assets located on the premises shall be responsible for maintenance and repair, as Councillor Margetson mentioned. Councillor McNaughton asked if other structures were going to be up, and the gentleman suggested that the boardwalk, shopping, and planning a new structure. If these new structures come up and they become assets, are we then responsible for the maintenance of those new assets?
Todd?
Through the chair to Councillor Bailey, I guess the question would be if the building was constructed on municipal property, then we would in effect own that parcel, that whatever that construction would be, and then would be ultimately responsible for it.
Thus, we would be responsible for.
That would be the way that I would interpret that. The proponent may in fact choose not to build a building on a piece of property that he doesn't own, and make it adjacent on the property that he does own, whereby he would continue to own that asset, from my perspective anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councillor McNaughton.
Thank you. I think I've got a few, so I'll start with a couple. And I understand that people want to get on with this contract, but until we have it quite right, I don't think I would want to sign off on it. And I want to make sure that we've sort of covered all of our bases. I'm not there yet with some of the additions, particularly the paragraphs in the sublease regarding concerns that I had for preservation of public access and preservation of green space and the natural assets on site. So, and I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get to that spot in the contract. So first, I would ask, sort of further to what Councillor Maynard brought up, Quinte Conservation are, through their core mandate, really doesn't have a lot of natural expertise in maintaining public access for municipal lands, and they don't necessarily, it's not making sense in my mind as a fit for who would best assure that public access is maintained. They do have some expertise, they do have quite a lot of expertise about conservation lands, but I don't think we're looking at this in this case. So I'm just wondering why the clauses referring to public access and protection of green space would be sort of arranged through them.
Is this to Todd?
I think so.
Through the mayor to Councillor McNaughton, I guess if you look at the clause that was inserted,
which clause is it?
Clause 14, public access and green space.
Okay.
Subsection 1, the tenant shall adhere to the spirit of the original expression of interest in terms of public access, which was to A, establish a revitalized marina operation which will service both the traveling public and local residents with access to improved marina facilities, services, and boat launch. And then B, which I think is what is that question from Councillor McNaughton, Tenacity Capital will operate on the property in consultation with Quinte Conservation to ensure public access to the shoreline is optimized and enhanced with pedestrian amenities that reflect vibrancy of the waterfront while respecting the natural habitat through lighting, seating, signage, and environmental preservation measures as guided and governed by Quinte Conservation. So I believe the second part of that clause, or the B part of that clause related to Quinte Conservation's involvement, is the shoreline implication in the need to gain approval if they were to construct a boardwalk there or whatever pedestrian thoroughfare that may exist.
Okay.
Okay, so if it does refer specifically to the boardwalk, perhaps that particular clause should explicitly refer specifically to the boardwalk, because there is the larger property as well. I do understand the spirit of the original EOI, but I'm wondering if I believe more explicit language would be relevant here or would be important here to maintain the natural assets that we might want to preserve, and to be quite specific about what is and is not allowed on that location. For example, if I'm not suggesting that CJ is going to put a big sign up saying CJ's Marina, but it's Picton's Marina, and if CJ is, considering some signage that might diminish the very public nature of the location, I don't see that being a good fit in that clause, and would prefer there to be a specific clause relating to that aspect. So that would be my preference at this time. I don't know what the language could be, but something very specific that clearly outlines that, plus a specific clause that clearly outlines the maintenance of the existing natural assets including, and as Councillor Maynard suggested, consultation with the municipality before any of those trees are taken down.
Any comment, Todd?
Through the mayor to Councillor McNaughton, I guess would address the natural asset question and the question from Councillor Maynard to the deputant, and then reiterated through Councillor McNaughton regarding trees and the requirement for written permission. The council has asked for a tree policy or a bylaw to come forward, and I believe one is coming in the near future that would ensconce the requirement to get a permit in order to take a tree off a piece of property, so off a municipal property. So that would be handled in a tree bylaw. I mean, certainly, as was the comments of the deputant, he was also comfortable having something inserted into the contract that assured written permission would happen. He wanted to know what the process was, and I think that would be much clearer in a tree bylaw that would be coming forward to council. Regarding public access, I mean, we could rework that clause, I guess, to make it more explicit. I believe the property itself, the spirit of what we've been trying to accomplish, and the public access that we've been seeking across boardwalks down in Picton Harbor sort of assures public access to the property, but I appreciate the comments from Councilor.
I think the intent of the company is to maintain it, but I don't think intent and spirit is always the best language for contracts.
Okay.
So some specificity, I think, would be beneficial. I'll wait for the next round.
Councillor Maynard?
Thank you. Now that we are questions on the agreement, so because we still own the property, can you direct me to the clause that says that any alterations to the property, whether it be any alterations to the property, have to be approved? Or is there such a clause? And sorry, I don't have every single one. I've got quite a few highlighted, but okay, thank you. So I think that then any update or modification. So that says to a capital asset, but we haven't got to the point yet where we consider trees and green space a capital asset. Will we see a site plan? Because I'm assuming the only reason they would likely work with Quinte Conservation would be to get permits to construct a building outside of the setbacks of the floodplain, or to come up with some kind of a cantilever docking system. I mean, outside of that, there's no role for Quinte Conservation particularly in this. So, but for the trees in particular, are they an asset, or do we just change that word from asset? How do you want to?
Through the mayor to Councillor Maynard. You have a couple of questions, I think, in your comments. First and foremost, any alteration, so clause 13.6 states that any upgrades made to the capital assets must be approved by the landlord. Any changes or alterations to the project, so if they were going to put anything substantial on the product, they would require building permits and potentially a site plan approval. With regards to changing, so I guess what you're asking to do is change capital assets, the capital asset, those two words into
I don't know, maybe we just drop the
Property?
word capital, just use assets.
Sure.
I- Yeah, we don't even have a definition of that.
I would also like to draw your attention to Schedule D of the document. It provides capital assets, or lists the capital assets on a map. It does not identify trees specifically as capital assets of the property.
We're back to 14.6 here, or 13.6?
Yeah.
I think you, with the tree policy, doesn't that cover this?
Through the mayor, back to the mayor, I believe it does, yes.
Okay.
Just hasn't been made.
Okay, we've got Councillor Forrester.
So do we get it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, kind of interesting. I've sat around here for 10 years talking about marinas, and I think every year I've brought it up, and two assets that we do not have the ability to, and if I've seen any asset that the county has been mismanaged over the last 10 years, we finally have a group that wants to come in here. Maybe it's going to cost a little bit of money, but I'm showing here 4 years where we've lost about $160,000. I would like to think some of the earlier numbers that I looked at, we might have lost about $700,000 to $800,000 over the last 9 years. I think anybody coming in, a private business, is going to try to manage this. We'll want to make it beautiful. We'll want to make it profitable. Maybe we'll get it back in 10 years if we want it back. We've had our opportunity, and we've failed miserably. And we've had every term of council, we've talked about a little bit, we've never moved ahead to do anything in a positive note. This is the first group that's come out here and said, we can make this a port that's of interest, a valuable port for our community, and I'm sure they're just not going to cut down trees for the heck of it. That won't be their goal here. They're going to try to manage this property properly and maybe make it a valuable asset for the county. And at the end of the day, if they do that, maybe in 10 years from now, they will be handing some money out and saying, yeah, we've turned the corner here. We're now making money. This is a place people want to be. So I'm willing to give some full support behind this just the way it is.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Nyman. Councillor Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple questions. First, I don't agree with, I don't support it because $1 a year just don't work for me, as I've said before. So I won't support it on that. I have a 3 or 4 part question here for staff. And I agree with Councilor Margetson about the capital assets and how we are paying for that. And I guess for me, people run a business to make money. Nobody does it just out of the good of their heart. There's got to be money to be made here. And in the end, when there's upgrades to be done, the taxpayers are still on the hook for it. And I guess that's what I'm kind of thinking. So the other part of that is you have 68 slips. There is some seasonal ones that the locals can use, but there's going to be some. And in the past, we know that we've seen the marina used a lot, and there was a lot of people, a lot of boats that came in there from the States, Toronto, all over. So it is tourist. So we're having a problem, as we've seen this year, with all the tourists. So my question, first part of the question is, how are we going to accommodate those tourists again? Because everybody this year, we've all heard what has happened and what the feeling of the residents are. The second part of the question is is there an out clause? So if there isn't public access to the water, it's terminated right away, or if there's anything that was agreed to that isn't upheld, it ends. And the third part of the question is, if you look on the page that had the capital assets, the little map, I'm just trying to get to it. So it shows everything there. The only thing it don't show is the sewage force main. So I'm wondering, is that still there? And if it is, because there was a sewage force main that was there that pumped up to the manhole on Bridge Street, ran up Head Street. If that's still there, how do we charge for the sewage? Because, and I can be, you correct me if I'm wrong, but as the bills are laid out now, for every cubic meter of water that comes in, you pay for that cubic meter of sewage going out. So if they only use 5 cubic meters of water a month, but they're pumping out boats, and that gets pumped up to the sewage plant, how do we get that? How do we get that revenue?
Okay, Todd, you've been making notes. I guess this is over to you.
Through the mayor to Councillor Nyman. So I see 3 questions have come forward in your comments. One is related to upgrades to the property and us being responsible for upgrades. The contract is pretty explicit. We are not to upgrade the buildings. We're just to provide for regular wear and tear. So, for example, Councillor Margetson, I think, referenced a roof on the Marina building that would need to be replaced at some point. That would be our responsibility. If they choose to upgrade the property, that is at their own expense. And at the end of the day, I guess I would like to remind council is at the end of the day, 5 years or 10 years, at the end of the life of this lease, that property comes back to us, and we still own the assets that are on it. And every year we have to inspect them, and they are only allowed to be degraded based on regular wear and tear. Anything else is at their expense. With regards to the potential for tourists coming in and how would we accommodate them, I mean, that's a pretty large and broad question. I'm not certain that visitors to Picton Harbor this year were responsible for a substantial number of challenges or issues related to tourism in our community. However, I would also like to remind council that tourism is a substantial economic sector of the economy, and that I mean, I believe to make the economics of the marina work, they have to welcome boats from away, as well as service the local boating community, and so it's part of that process. I would say, and I think CJ sort of highlighted that if a boat comes into the Picton Harbor and docks in the marina, it's not like they're, which we commonly hear the challenges related to cars in the community and using our roads and whatever. I mean, people would be coming in and either using pedestrian traffic or taxi cabs or car services, predominantly using the main street of Picton and conducting commerce in the shops there. I'm not sure that that's as substantial a problem as maybe a 4-mile line of cars trying to get into Sandbanks Provincial Park. And then finally with sewage, I must confess I do not have an answer to your question, Councillor Nyman. I mean, certainly the intention is that any water and wastewater charges incurred at the property would be at the expense of the leasee and not the landlord.
Okay. All right. Councillor Bolick.
I had a hard time hearing Todd's answer to the sewage. he stated out there.
So,
Did I get that
sorry,
response
sorry,
again?
Councillor Nyman, I can respond again. I don't have generally a good answer to the sewage question. I mean, they are responsible for their water and wastewater costs. I don't believe the sewage is I believe the pump outs, looking for
The exact answer, okay.
Okay, I
there was
missed
a
half
third.
that, but I just want to make sure, but I thought I heard you say that we don't know how we're gonna cover this, or how we're gonna charge for the sewage. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's explicit in the lease that the leasee is responsible to pay the utilities, including water and wastewater charges.
Right.
Now, I can't suggest, I don't know exactly how they track the wastewater as opposed to the water. I don't have that answer for you. You also asked a fourth question related to if they do not maintain or how do we get out of this if they are not living up to what it is they're supposed to be doing. That would be clause 5 of the contract, recertification of breach. So it says in the event that it is determined that the tenant is in breach of its obligations, the landlord may, without limiting any other rights or remedies, provide the tenant with notice in writing. They can fix, and if it isn't fixed to our satisfaction, we have the right to break the agreement.
Okay.
Just one quick follow-up.
There were 3 questions. You'll have to wait. We've got some other questions here, Councillor Nyman. Councillor Bullock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comment refers to evidence-based decision-making, and I think there's a key piece of evidence that we don't have at this point. I believe that the environmental impacts go beyond what happens to the trees on that property. We're talking about boats in the water. We already know what happens when there's a fuel spill in Picton Bay, because we survived that with much cost and much aggravation. We also, as a council, a year and a half ago, declared a climate emergency. And now we're at a point of trying to approve something that's going to put more boats, presumably motorboats, into the county without any input from the Environmental Advisory Committee. So again, that's 2 key pieces of information we don't have in front of us right now. And I would suggest, based on that this should be referred back to staff to seek an opinion from the Environmental Advisory Committee as to the environmental impacts of this proposal.
Any comment, Todd? I'm not sure if this went to the EAC or not. Okay.
Through the mayor to Councillor Bullock, I did not go to the Environmental Advisory Committee, although I believe there is a clause related to the environment, although I mean, the point is taken that this is a marina. It would service both sail and motorboats. It is a traditional activity in Prince Edward County. I can appreciate the concerns around the environmental.
And just supplementary, and this isn't necessarily for staff, it's just for council. At this point, what I'm suggesting is we don't have the information. And before we make a decision that's going to go on for a number of years, in the context of a climate emergency that we as a council declared, it behooves us to get that information before we make this decision.
Just to,
so I don't know whether I should be suggesting that we refer this back as opposed to voting on it tonight. And I'd leave that to Madam Clerk to give us advice on that.
Todd?
Just to clarify, there is some clauses related to the environment, and that's section 11 of the lease. Both defines environmental laws and requires compliance with the environmental laws.
It says nothing about what the CO2 emissions are going to be or anything like that. I'm referring, or as far as any spills, what the risk is to any spills. And those are the 2 issues that I'm seeking more information on.
Okay. Councillor Margetson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think for the sake of making sure that we get this right and comfortable, myself comfortable for voting for it, which I want to do because I think this agreement allows for some work to be done and the activation of the marina that could be a good thing based on our record. But I still, and I don't want to go on too long about it, but I think there are some things in the repair and maintenance and replacement that still could be better clarified. And I also feel that I would be more comfortable if I knew what the expectancy of our assets and what our obligations are going to be in the next 10 years. For instance, in the section on repair and maintenance and replacement, Clause 3, the second paragraph, it says the tenant shall keep and maintain the whole, including capital assets, in good order and make all needed repairs and replacements. And then on number 5, it says the landlord, as the owner of the capital assets, shall be responsible for maintenance and repair. So it's really unclear who's really responsible for what. And even if we are going to be responsible as a municipality and the taxpayers for maintenance and repair of the capital assets, I'd like to know what those things are in the next 10 years. It would just, it's transparency for the public as we go into an agreement. And I feel if we could have that information by referring this back to staff for a month, it would make me more comfortable. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Councillor McNaughton.
Thank you. I further to what Councillor Bullock said, I had on my list to, as the next item, to refer to the yacht club's policies on environmental policies guiding handling bilge, fuel spills, etc., beyond compliance with environmental laws because they've got a sample laid out. So it would be good to have an opportunity to review that as well and see where that would take us. They also have some explicit language on docking policies, but generally the more important ones would be pollution prevention and environmental policies and complicity with environmental laws. We still also have never established a maximum of slips, and in my reckoning, the municipality would do well to state that. I see the boundaries of the water lots, but that's still a substantial amount of hectares and could provide quite a lot of room for quite a lot of slips. So it would be nice to have that. I believe it would be nice to have that defined. And further to what Councillor Forster said, it's good to get a contract right. It's good to be patient and get the contract right rather than, look back with regret and say, I wish we had used more explicit language regarding this. I think it's good to be patient and be as thorough as we can be.
Councillor Forster, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And then we're going to move on.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Councillor Bullock, what he said here about looking into the environmental impact, only because we did declare a climate emergency, which I didn't necessarily agree with, but this has opened up a can of worms for a whole bunch of things here. If this motion is turned down tonight, I would like to see the projected costs of running this marina to the taxpayers for the next 10 years. Because if I'm this gentleman here, I'm thinking pretty quickly about walking away from this.
Okay.
So I would like to see projected costs of running this marina for the next 10 years with upkeeps. I would also like to see what we've spent. We've only seen the last 4 years for the last 10 years, because I think there's a big jump in some of those years in there, and any transfers from reserves that went into operating that marina. Counting the Wellington one too, please.
All right, well, let's see where this goes. Councillor St. Jean, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship. Does everybody understand that the 68 slips that Mr. Thompson is proposing are on his water lots, not the one we own? You cannot physically put 68 slips on Part 2 water lot in front of the Picton Marina. The amount of slips that'll go there are minimal. And don't look at me that way, Councillor McNaughton. I have every right to say what I need to say, okay? And I completely disagree with your position on...
We're not having an argument. Councillor
I'm
St.
not,
Jean
she
has
is.
the floor.
Look, first of all, there's a lot going on here. The $1 a year lease is to our benefit to $38,000 a year, folks. Think about it. We're not going to have to pay that out. Our taxpayers are not going to have to pay that out. So the $1 a year thing is ridiculous. Don't even think about that. But here we are looking at water lots, and everybody's worried about how many slips are going to go out there in front of our docks. I can tell you it's going to be 1 or 2 likely. You can't put boats there. Take a look at page, where's the stupid map here? Page 80. There's the GIS map. It shows what we own. That fixed dock goes out pretty much as far as our water lot does. You're not going to put a whole lot there. So the impact on the environment, the impact on the water quality there is going to be nothing any more than we already have there. I, for one, think this is the best deal that we've ever seen and we are ever going to see for this marina. I was here 17 years ago when we leased it out before. What a massive failure that was. They ran away screaming because they were losing their shirt. We have somebody that's coming forward that is willing to invest, not just in his own property, which will be great for us because it could create jobs. In fact, I'm pretty sure it will. It's going to be good for our economy because we're now going to get back the marina slips that were there historically for a very, very long time. Looking at there's so much to unpackage here. I think people are way over managing this agreement and thinking too far into it. My God, folks, we asked our staff to go back and renegotiate. Why didn't everybody come up with all these questions before? I just don't get this. Like, why, please, Your Worship, the sidebar comments are not helpful right now.
No, we're not having sidebar comments.
So I'm just gonna finish by saying, in 2016, I was asked, what's the best thing you could do to improve the accessibility from the harbor and the harbor? My answer was you need a public-private partnership because this municipality does not have the means, the drive, or the money to reinvest in that marina. Therefore, when somebody comes forward like this, that is willing to invest, and by the way, a local boy who's come home to reinvest in his community, I'm going to support that. This is not going to cost the taxpayers one dime. We're saving $38,213 a year over the last 4 years, if not more in the future. I think this is a good deal, and I think we just need to get this over with, and when the time comes, I want a recorded vote on this. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Roberts, last word to you, and then we're going to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, where to begin? This contract, if finally signed off on, saves the county, municipality, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And at the end of 5 or 10 years, we have, what, millions of dollars of assets to show for it? It's not a bad deal just starting there. The contract itself is pretty specific and pretty tight around, from my experience of contracts, around reassurances about public access and optimal and enhanced pedestrian amenities, respecting the natural habitat. It looks to me on the face of it as a pretty good win-win for the community, given the history the community has with regard to the marina and harborfront. And it's not just the lost costs, the sunk costs, but it's also the lost opportunity costs of continuing to do nothing and remembering that this was the only person who stepped forward when we put out an expression of interest. So be careful what you ask for. We've got a really good deal here, and asking too much, be careful.
Todd, if I may ask you, how long have you been negotiating with CJ?
Through the mayor, back to yourself. Personally, myself, in conversations with CJ regarding this property as of July 5th, 2019, because this conversation was happening with my predecessor prior to my taking the role in an acting capacity. But I know that my predecessor was in conversations, interest of this party on this property since 2017 or 2018. I think CJ referenced he's been trying for 4 years to get to this point. And so certainly it wasn't just the work that we did, but the work of my predecessor that brought us to this point.
Okay, so we're going back years. Okay, Councillor McNaughton, well, we're going to go around the horn again?
Well, just briefly, I just wanted staff to define the ownership of the water lots, because I'm not clear anymore. I thought I was.
Ownership of the water lots, Todd?
Who owns the water lots? Is that what you're asking, Councillor
Yes,
McNaughton?
'cause,
Sorry, just for clarification?
Yes. Just simply.
So from what I understand, the water lots are owned by the Ministry of Natural Resources that we lease.
So in the entirety of the water lots at the tip of the bay, is there a portion that belongs to tip of the bay?
What, the water lot at tip of the bay?
Yeah, is there one?
There is water lot. Part one of the water lot is at tip of the bay. It's owned by the Ministry of Natural Resources.
It is owned by the Ministry of Natural Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that.
Councillor Prinzen, did I see your hand?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've sat quietly and listened to everybody once, twice, 3 times, and I just want to say thanks to CJ for doing this. Thanks to staff for doing this. This is exactly what we need. We need this to get going. You can see the emotion in the room tonight. It is an issue that's been going on for a lot of years. We had one person, I said that last time, we had one person come to the table. We have lots of ideas now. Where were those people when we asked for the expression of interest? So this got my full support. I hope it gets the full support, and I'd love to see where it goes with CJ, and remembering that in 10 years, we will get it back if something, so any dollar we invest as taxpayers on an asset, from my business, if I put money into an asset, it's going to be there in 10 years. So it's a win-win-win, and I really hope it passes tonight so CJ can get to work on his vision. Thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to know how, when I asked Todd how long the discussions have been going on, shortly after the election last year, I had a meeting with CJ, who came into the office. He was incredibly passionate about a couple of things. First of all, the fact that he was coming back to the municipality as a county boy, as Councillor St. Jean referred to him, and he quite rightly referred to himself. Actually, he called himself a proud country boy. He shared his vision, his desire to make this asset a going concern. And we've gone through this entire process for months and months and months. A lot of hard work, a lot of effort has gone into, first of all, coming up with the agreement, then refining, re-refining, commentary from members of council. I am, like Councillor Prinzen, and I think many in the room, most appreciative that CJ has stuck with us. you know, he's the only one that came forward. He's the only one that has made changes where changes have been requested. He's bent. You know, he is adjusting, and he will continue to adjust. There's part of this agreement that gives him, you know, a shot at the Wellington Arena or Wellington Marina, if that becomes available. And I'm supportive of moving forward with this, because I agree it is it entirely perfect? Can we change a little here and a little there? You know, if we got this thing, you know, went through 4 or 5 more iterations of this, we'd still find things that we think were not perfect. But there are different opportunities for us to revisit this agreement with the renewal clauses. So I'm supportive. I want to get this guy going, get this off our plate, deal responsibly with the losses we have incurred, get the marina up to the point that it can be the jewel that I think previous councils, and I think this council certainly thinks it can be. So I am in support of this as is, and I'd like to see it move forward. So there are, Madam Clerk, I'm having trouble seeing what's happening behind me, so I'm relying on messages from you.
Councillor Bolick, do you still wish to put a referral motion on the floor?
Yes, a referral motion seconded by Councillor Nyman. And I believe you have the wording, if you could read it for us, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by Councillor Bolick, seconded by Councillor Nyman, that report CSP 50-2020 be referred back to staff to further clarify some aspects of the agreement, including repair and maintenance clauses, projected costs of municipally running the marina for the last 10 years, including transfers from reserves, public access, and to address environmental concerns.
So that's a referral motion. Now let me ask the question of staff. With that fairly lengthy list of requests, how long do you think that would take to deal with and report back to council, given what is coming before us in October, November, and December?
Through you, the mayor, I would say that given our aggressive agenda and where we are heading into budget and the time this would take and what else staff are occupied with, I think we could reasonably come back in the front part of 2021 with a revised agreement. We are not currently planning council meetings in December because we're allocating nearly a week of budget deliberations.
Okay, so we are talking a 4-month delay. Okay. All right, so Madam Clerk, do we want to vote on this?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can ask for a recorded vote, please.
Sure.
And just to clarify, Councillor Nyman has asked that sewer billing be also included in what staff need to clarify.
Okay, we'll add that as item H. Okay?
Councillor Bolick.
In favor of?
Councillor Forrester.
Opposed to.
Councillor Harper.
Opposed to.
Councillor Hirsch.
Opposed to.
Councillor McNaughton.
In favor of.
Councillor Margetson.
Favor.
Councillor Maynard.
In favor of.
Councillor McMahon.
Opposed to.
Councillor Nyman.
In favor of.
Councillor Prinzen.
Opposed to.
Councillor Roberts.
Opposed to.
Councillor St. Jean.
Opposed to.
Councillor Bailey.
Opposed to.
Mayor Ferguson.
Opposed.
And that loses 9-5.
Okay. So that goes back to the original motion?
Correct.
Okay. I don't think we need it reread.
No, that was a Bailey McMahon motion.
Okay. So that's on the floor, so we'll, Councillor St. Jean has requested a recorded vote.
Councillor St. Jean.
In favor of.
Councillor Bailey.
In favor of.
Councillor Bolick.
Opposed to.
Councillor Forrester.
In favor of.
Councillor Harper.
In favor of.
Councillor Hirsch.
In favor of.
Councillor McNaughton.
Opposed to.
Councillor Margetson.
Opposed to.
Councillor Maynard.
Opposed to.
Councillor McMahon.
In favor of.
Councillor Nyman.
Opposed to.
Councillor Prinzen.
In favor of.
Councillor Roberts.
In favor.
Mayor Ferguson.
In favor.
And that carries 9-5.
Thank you. That moves us to, we'll take a recess. Okay. All right, so I'll call the meeting back to order. We are now at item 9.2 in the agenda. Excuse me. If we could have a mover and a seconder put this on the floor, please. Anybody? Councillor McMahon, seconded by Councillor St. Jean.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is McMahon St. Jean motion that council receive report DS 125-2020 for information, that the proposed Wellington Urban Center interim control bylaw be approved, and that 3, that staff bring forward an information report which reviews the policies and schedules of the Wellington Urban Area Secondary Plan within 12 months of passing of the proposed interim control bylaw.
Thank you. Questions? Comments? Councillor Maynard.
My question is, why is this coming to us directly at council and not at committee of the whole? Because we have had some comments from the audience that we now really don't have time to address.
Okay, we'll give that to Madam CAO.
Through the mayor to Councillor Maynard. So this went to the full committee of planning and was used as a proxy for committee of the whole because it was the full committee for a discussion at that point and then brought here for final decision. So I appreciate it didn't typically go through committee. We would typically go through the committee of the whole, but because it went through planning committee, which is also the full council, we moved straight to council.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Harper.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. First, maybe it might be for Matt. I think my question might be Matt's question. Matt, the Greer property, which is 117 acres, 60% of which is currently zoned neighborhood development. How much more neighborhood development exists north of Millennium Trail? So when we think about this interim control bylaw, how much are we really looking to sort of put a pause on here? Is there much beyond the Greer property? That'd be my first question.
Yes, through the chair, there are lands to the west of the Greer property, and I believe there's some lands east of Belleville Road, east of the Caitlin site that are also within that designation. So there's quite a few, there's different chunks of property that make up that designation in both those locations. So there's certainly more than one or two other properties that are in this category.
Okay, just a follow-up if I could for staff would be, I guess there's a question of, so you've come to us with this idea, which in principle makes some sense to me, because I think that the residents of Wellington are concerned about how much growth is being entertained and how quickly it's going to happen. So if I think from the standpoint of my constituents, it's something that we have to look at seriously. But what do you see as planners in terms of the problem that you're trying to prevent? When you look at the secondary plan, you look at the growth, you look at the servicing agreement that you're working out with the developers that are currently in play. What is the essential problem that you're trying to address through this mechanism?
Mike?
If I may, it seems that the amount of growth that's in this area is unprecedented, and this would give us a bit of a pause to deal with those individual landowners that are, I guess, chomping at the bit to move forward, and trying to get some sort of agreement from a servicing point of view to allow for them to move forward. If or without the ICBL, the interim control bylaw, there might be the opportunity where other players come to the table later in the game when you've sort of got everything kind of worked out, and now you have to fit somebody else into the pie that perhaps just doesn't fit at that point in time. So by putting the interim control bylaw in play, it allows us to work with the existing developers to come up with a proper servicing plan, and it also allows us to look at the remainder of the secondary plan to see if there's any tweaks in there that makes sense from a servicing point of view, and which lands come first, and phase the development so that everybody knows how the lands are be developed, and in what terms and what sort of costs might be afforded to those particular properties. So it's a bit of a pause, gives us some time to work through some things and tweak the secondary plan if required based on servicing.
Okay. Councillor Forrester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I guess I'd ask a question. Did we take into consideration what that would make, or how this would affect any deals going through on properties? And what sort of, is there any repercussions against us because of that? You know, when we put a quick bylaw and just sort of on the fly. You know, you heard the Greer speaking where they have a deal in place, and all of a sudden, out of the middle of nowhere, we just sort of, brakes are on and we'll get back to you when we know. This is going to come up with a few applications.
Councillor Forrester, if you could speak into the microphone.
Oh, sorry. And I'm just worried about this moving forward with other applications or other interim bylaws we're looking to put into place.
Once the bylaw goes into play, it will it'll stop development from taking place on those properties that are affected. We can still have negotiations with them and had some discussions, but we can move forward in some aspects, but for the most part, it stops the development and forces us to deal with those that are at the table. Now, in terms of any deals that are ongoing, when we were, I guess, moving forward with this particular idea, we weren't aware of any deals that were precedent with any of the landowners. So this is fairly new to staff in terms of sale being pending, I guess. So once the ICBL goes down, I don't believe there's any appeal rights, so it would be in place for up to a year. My guess is that we could get through the document fairly quickly once the interim control bylaw is down. So I don't anticipate a year of sort of delay in any other applications coming forward.
Okay, and just to follow up with that, well, in this case here with the Greer property, we know this could basically scrub the deal right off the bat here. So I guess, how do we deal with that? And any other interim bylaws we may put in place where projects are in the works, where people have invested money, time, and then just like that, it comes to a halt without a whole lot of notice.
Understanding. Moving forward with the review of the concept plan or the secondary plan, like I said, it'd be sort of minor tweaks at the most. I don't see an overhaul. I mean, the plan is fairly new. It had a lot of public consultation. There weren't any appeals to the secondary plan, so my limited time here, that seems like then that's a plan that has a lot of merit within the community and within the landowners that are in that location. So I don't anticipate any real major changes to any of the designations that are foreseen. And as we move through the process, we'll have public consultations. We'll have those meetings with the individual landowners to try and work with them if there are changes to their property.
Thank you.
Councillor Margetson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question, Michael. And you just alluded to the process going forward. So the interim control bylaw would allow staff time to review the land use policies and bring to council recommendations. And you said you could have public engagement. Does that happen within the time frame of the interim control bylaw? Or do you do that work and then it comes back to council as a potential amendment to the Wellington Urban Center secondary plan? I'm just trying to understand the process and where the public gets the opportunity to be engaged in any proposals that you come forward with after you review the secondary plan.
It would follow much along the same lines as when the secondary plan was created, in terms of we'd go away, do our homework, we'd have a public consultation to sort of present our findings, have some discussions, go away, fine tune, and then bring back another plan that sort of addresses some of the concerns as much as possible. And then whenever those concerns are sort of mostly dealt with or all dealt with, then we come back to council for adoption of that particular and approval of that new document. And then we take off the interim control bylaw.
Okay, so it's all done within the term of
correct.
Yeah, within the year.
You
So
know,
there'd be public information sessions and
absolutely.
ability. Okay, thank you.
Anybody on Zoom with any questions? Councillor Bolick, Councillor Nyman.
Councillor Nyman, go ahead. Councillor Nyman.
Yes, am I able to ask?
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. So you might have already, I'm sure it's Michael that we're talking to, that's sitting there, right? I can't see him.
Yes, that's Michael.
Okay, thank you. So if I'm reading this right, and I might have misunderstood it at the planning, but my understanding was to try and get a service agreement with cost sharing. It's kind of what we were looking at with this interim control bylaw. So I just don't understand, if the secondary plan is only 5 years old, what areas are have caused concern for the secondary plan, because we did the assessment with the water and sewer, and I'm just trying to understand why we're putting the hold on everything to look at the secondary plan again. And the and maybe I've read it wrong, but any developer that has already started the process, and I guess starting the process would be by submitting a plan, is able to continue on. Is that my understanding?
Is that you asking that of Mike?
Yes, I guess that's who it's, yeah.
Okay.
Please.
Yes, so we'll carry on with the existing applications that are with us, knowing that we have to work with them to, first of all, design the new infrastructure, and then determine what that's going to look like, where it's going to go, and how much capacity that's going to have. And once we had done that analysis, it'll also be some residual capacity, and then we'll have to determine, and that's part of the re-examination of the secondary plan, is what is that residual going to look like? Where does it go? Who does it service? And it allows us to either tweak the plan if we think that we're not going to have enough capacity to support everybody, or only support maybe a portion of the plan. So then how do we phase in the rest of the lands that are within the Wellington secondary plan? So that's kind of where we are at this point in time.
Okay, Councillor Nyman?
Can I have a quick follow-up?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So let's use the Greer property. I guess we heard that there's a buyer there. So this here would just put him on hold. And I guess not knowing that that land could be developed then, or any other land that is in the area that somebody's looking to buy, or potential development, then I guess they're pretty much on hold for a year, and without really knowing that they can develop that whole parcel, I guess. Is that right?
Correct. In a lot of ways, all the development is on hold. I mean, we have all of these plans, these really nice subdivisions, but there's no capacity to actually allow them to be developed. So until we get a plan in place on how we're going to service all these lands, everybody's on hold. So whether it's going to be 6 months or a year, I mean, who knows how long it's going to take us to come up with a servicing plan with the existing 5 landowners. I believe it's 5. And then once we come up with a plan on how we're going to service those lands, then we'll have to look at the residual and how we then allocate the residual to allow for the development of the remainder.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Harper.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just wondering,
Ward.
so other than the Greers, no one else has squawked over the interim control bylaw, from what I understand.
Correct. That's my understanding as well.
So is there a scenario where, because I'm sensitive to, as Councillor Forrester pointed out, that you know, they were down this path, been wanting to go down this path, is there any ability to accommodate them within this, with this decision? So there's an interim control bylaw, but somehow we would allow that property to be excluded from that.
Yeah. Council has a prerogative to determine what lands are in and what lands are out of the interim control bylaw. So if you feel that their land should be exempt, and that we can go forward with them as part of the negotiation team, if you want to call it that, for developing the remainder of the infrastructure that's required to service those lands that are exempt, then that's something that council can direct staff.
Councillor Bailey.
Michael, whoa. A question about the process. In the beginning, when you were speaking, I almost thought that you were going to suggest that you might be able to get everything done within the year. If you need more time, what's the mechanics of going into a furtherance of this?
If we want to, well, the Planning Act allows us for another year extension, so we'd have to come back to council and ask for a year extension, explain why we need that extra year. But that becomes appealable as well. So it's incumbent on staff to work with the development community in an efficient form and manner to get the issues resolved and let's move forward. I mean, we have 5 developers who want to develop.
Correct.
I mean, we want to move too. We want to process these applications and get them out the door and get some construction activity going on. I mean, that's our goal as well.
Very good, thank you.
Councillor Hirsch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, just coming back to the Greer situation, if I understand correctly, half of what he considers to be single property, half of it was subject to the previous ICBL, and the report before us tonight is suggesting that, well, we can't reimpose the ICBL on that piece. If that's the case, then is there any real risk in as Councillor Harper was kind of suggesting, simply excluding the entirety of the Greer property at this point? He did come forward and made his point. No one else has done that. Because even if we exclude it and he sells it on the 24th, or he said he's going to close the end of October, I can't imagine any kind of development application would come in too quickly. And even if it did, would our response to that application not simply be, well, right now we don't have any water or sewer for you, so it's not going to go anywhere until we get that figured out? Is that the right scenario to be looking at?
Madam CAO?
So while we have not had a formal complaint other than the Greers about the interim control bylaw, I would like council to be aware that Michael and I did meet with the prospective buyer of the Greer property, and he was interested in more than the Greer property. He's interested in purchasing at least 2 adjacent properties and proposing a development would be a large block development that would cover all of the land. So I think that while it might look expedient to change this particular motion to exclude the Greer property from the interim control bylaw, it might not solve the core problem, which was that the Greers had a buyer on the line, because the buyer may walk away if they only can get half of the piece that they were trying to buy at the same time. So I just put that out there. The other, just to answer your question, Councillor, the other option and the alternative option here is that we rely on our existing tools of linking planning decisions to sufficient infrastructure servicing, which means that we can give you approval as a council, but we still can't plug you in until we have sufficient servicing in place. So the interim control bylaw was one way to signal that in a very formal way and create a public process around taking a second look at the secondary plan to see if anything else needs to change. But the alternative is the current path, which would be, as projects come in, they can be reviewed from a planning perspective, but ultimately can't move forward until we have the servicing in place.
Councillor Forrester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like the second option better, Marcia. But, I'm also looking at Thursday's Committee of the Whole, where we have another interim bylaw be put in effect for 1 year for land use planning studies. So I guess we're sending the message out here in the next 2 days as we're closed for business, and that planning meetings don't really have to do what they normally do and look at everything individually and decide if this is the right fit. This is what concerns me, because out of the blue, I've got 2 interim bylaws that shut down development as a whole. I'm a little surprised that these two would come this close to each other. And I think we have to look at both of them as a whole and really decide, is this what we want to do? Because it's very similar, 6.4 on Thursday's agenda.
Okay, well, let's just stick with
Well,
tonight's agenda.
sorry, Mr. Mayor. This has happened, and again, you're sitting here where you look at something else that's in the future and we say we're not discussing that tonight. But this has a great effect on that, and we should be discussing them as a whole. Because when you just look at one and say, we're not talking about this right now, we're not going to consider this right now, but this one has an effect on this one. Because if we go this way, then we have to go that way on that one, because then we have there's no consistency on what we're doing here. So that's why I'm bringing up that one there.
Okay, well, we differ on the approach. So was there a question there?
No,
Okay.
I'm just saying, here we have two interim
Okay.
bylaws that are basically shutting down what I'm seeing here, one Wellington and then all interlinks in the county. Like I'm not quite sure what all this means and why the planning process that we have right now cannot, where we look at individual emotions coming to us, decide if we don't have capacity in water and sewage, then we put a hold on it until we get there. But putting a hold on everything for a year, to me, is not the way to go. Just an opinion.
Okay. My concern is with and I've spoken to staff about this, the concern with the Greer, similar to what Councillor Forrester mentioned, which is, at the 11th hour, changing the game when they've already gone through this with the other property 2 years or so ago. The other issue was that during one of the delegation or comments from the audience, either Mr. Greer or his planner, he mentioned that meetings had taken place with staff prior to this. Did that I'm just trying to figure out the knowledge that they would have had about this, or staff would have had about the pending sale. And, I must say, I do sympathize with them for being caught in this position.
Matt, can you answer that question?
Through the chair, I'm not aware of any discussions that we've had with the potential buyer of the Greer property or the Greers on their own site. There's been no formal pre-consultation meeting. So not recently, not within the last 6 months. I'm not aware of any discussions.
Okay. All right. And there's no way to, similar to what Councillor Harper was mentioning, exclude that portion of land?
Through the mayor, to yourself, I guess, and council, so you definitely could, by motion, we could amend the, but because I know that there is a buyer who wanted to purchase both parcels, I'm not sure that solves the Greer family's concerns with the deal, that it still may put the deal at risk. So if that's the concern of council, then the other option of not moving forward with the interim control bylaw and instead relying on the existing process and leveraging planning decisions, holding them back until we have adequate servicing would be the other alternative to not, if there's consensus about trying to resolve the Greer family situation.
Okay, well, just to be clear, I think the putting a pause does make sense in Wellington, which is white hot. It's just this particular set of circumstances we have to somehow get over. Councillor Hirsch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for the CAO. What happens if we were to abandon the ICBL proposal here? What happens to our deals with the existing applicants on the cost sharing of our infrastructure?
Through the mayor to Councillor Hirsch, the existing conversations happening around a development servicing agreement were exempt from the ICBL the way it was drafted. So we would continue down that path to try and secure those deals. Those projects are all much advanced compared to anyone contemplating purchasing the Greer property or anything else. So provided we can come to a conclusion on a process for those projects, I think that we would, it wouldn't have an impact.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to the CAO. So in terms of developments that are not captured by this, that would include those development proposals that council heard at the Regent Theatre quite recently that all focused on Wellington. Would they represent developments that are far enough advanced that they would not be captured by this? I'm thinking there was Wellington Bay Estates, there was Caitlin maybe, there were a couple of others. They would not be captured by this. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that's correct. It's not stated in words, it's stated through picture in the bylaw by identifying land. So based on, basically if you look at that map, the white areas that don't look like urban fabric are the lands where that, where those projects were proposed.
Okay, any other questions? I will say I'm still, uncomfortable about the fact that we are changing the rules for, somebody that had, in good faith, was negotiating with a vendor, and I don't know if anybody sitting here wants to put anything on the floor to attend to that. I can't, but that's my concern, and we have to be, I won't go into it. It's just, it bothers me we're changing this, and other rules can be changed quickly without consideration of what may be in the hopper. Councillor Forrester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, as much as I'd like to put something in just for the Greers, but then that would kind of seem like favoritism to one particular family in the county. But just as a whole, I cannot support this right now. But I don't think we can put just a family, because people are going to say, what are you guys doing?
All right, well, we've got a motion on the floor. So, Madam Clerk, movers and seconders.
Councillor McMahon and Councillor St. Jean.
Councillor McMahon's Councillor St. Jean. Okay, Councillor Forrester wants a recorded vote.
Councillor Forrester.
Opposed to.
Councillor Harper.
Opposed to.
Councillor Hirsch.
In favor.
Councillor McNaughton.
In favor.
Councillor Margetson.
In favor.
Councillor Maynard.
In favor.
Councillor McMahon.
In favor of.
Councillor Nyman.
Opposed to.
Councillor Prinzen.
Opposed to.
Councillor Roberts.
In favor.
Councillor St. Jean.
In favor of.
Councillor Bailey.
In favor.
Councillor Bolick.
In favor.
Mayor Ferguson.
Opposed?
And that carries 9-5.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move to item 9.3 if we could have a mover and a seconder for this, please. Councillor Hirsch, seconded by Councillor McNaughton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a Hirsch-McNaughton motion that council received report OP 12-2020 for information, that council award tender 2020-EDW-66 to Miller Paving Limited in the amount of $898,936.48 plus HST, and that a bylaw to authorize the execution of the agreement between the County of Prince Edward and Miller Paving Limited be enacted. And if I might speak to the motion?
You may.
Thank you. I just wanted to give my thanks to staff, in particular Tanya Redden, for a really good report. Even had a good paragraph about what microsurfacing actually is. In fact, both of your reports tonight, the next item, I'll cover both of them with the same intervention. Both reports are exceptionally well written. We have analysis of the bids. We didn't have to ask for that separately. Well done. I even checked with your boss, and he said, "Yeah, you wrote that all yourself. It wasn't a Marcia Wallace rewrite." So congratulations, and I support the motion.
Okay. Councillor Bailey.
I would never have perceived this as a Marcia rewrite. Tanya, a question to you. We pass this, these jobs get started, and will they be done this year, or are we getting late in the game because of the season?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bailey, the intent is definitely to complete it this season. I have been in talks with Miller Paving. They are doing our surface treatment contract as well. They have us penciled in. They were aware that the award was going tonight, so with the AOK, we are on the schedule for this season.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other, Councillor Maynard?
Thank you. So it is on the same vein as the scheduling, because we know the later you get in the season, it's not good for pavement, and my understanding it's even that this microsurfacing is even more challenged by any frost or cold weather and its ability to adhere. So have we set a deadline?
Through the mayor to Councillor Maynard, there was a deadline in the tender. I'm sorry, I don't remember it offhand, but I did also have in there the stipulation subject to temperatures. So in the Ontario specifications, it lays out the temperatures for microsurfacing. So if we fall below those temperatures, they won't be completing it, but it is definitely their intent to complete it soon. I want to say early October is kind of the schedule they're giving me. I don't want to stand by that.
Yeah.
Things change in construction,
Yeah.
but it's their intent to complete it this year as well, while the temperatures are still good.
Do you know what that temperature is by any chance, even or the range?
I don't
Okay.
offhand, I'm sorry.
All right.
Anybody else? Councillor St. Jean.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too would like to compliment Tanya on a very well-written report. I do have one question. With regards to the work being done, do you know, and maybe I missed it in the report, I don't know, I looked around, how many kilometers of roads approximately are being treated?
Through the mayor to Councillor St. Jean. I don't think I have the exact number in this report now that you say that. I based the tender on a meter squared. I can't recall right offhand how many I'm sorry, I can't even guess without my files in front of me.
Okay, yeah, and I did note the 57,760 square meters, but that's the reason I asked that question, because no doubt Councillor Hirsch will likely get a question or two.
Okay, anybody else?
Thank you.
So we've got the motion on the floor. We'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much, Tanya. So we'll move to item 9.4. Could I have a mover and a seconder for this, please? Councillor Margetson and Councillor Prinzen.
Thank you. This is a Margetson-Prinzen motion that council receive report OP 15/2020 for information, that council award tender 2020 EDW 67 to RJ Equipment Rentals in the annual amount of $144,000 plus HST, and that a bylaw to authorize the execution of the agreement between the County of Prince Edward and RJ Equipment Rentals be enacted.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries. We'll go to 9.5. Have a mover and a seconder for this, please. This is a finance motion. Councillor McNaughton, seconded by Councillor Maynard.
Thank you. This is the McNaughton-Maynard motion that council receive report FIN-11-2020 for information, and that the 2019 operating deficit in the amount of $244,902 be funded from the tax rate stabilization reserve.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That carries. 9.6, mover and a seconder, or this is my resolution. Okay. That's why I need the other glasses. Yeah, this is a resolution. I'll speak to it in a minute. Whereas on April 22nd, 2020, the United Counties of Prescott and Russell announced the creation of a unique and innovative food hub in Eastern Ontario. And whereas in partnership with small and medium-sized agricultural producers from the private sector, the United Counties of Prescott and Russell will build a federally licensed meat and vegetable processing facility, which will include processing, packaging, and distribution capabilities to meet the needs of regional and national markets. And whereas this $36 million project will create 65 jobs and will lead in the recovery and revival of agri-food in the eastern region, which is timely considering the impact of COVID-19 pandemic has had on the sector. And therefore, be it resolved, that Prince Edward County supports the United Counties of Prescott and Russell and congratulates the municipality in this innovative project. What, just by way of explanation, the Prescott Russell is part of the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus. This facility is going to involve, as the resolution states, meat and vegetable processing, but importantly will allow local producers, and local can mean producers from Prince Edward County, access to this type of processing. So I think part of this is also to mitigate the intrusion of, somebody moving in some other large multinational. So I think it's a terrific idea, and they are asking for our support, and I certainly support this initiative. So I'll answer any questions as best I can. Councillor McNaughton?
Yeah, does it give you any ideas about Prince Edward County and our historic association to canneries, and perhaps maybe there are some stimulus opportunities here? And if there is ever seed money available, perhaps that's something that we should look into for our region too. I do know that there's a certain amount of cachet attached to products from Prince Edward County, and that having some local food production options, like a local cannery of any size, might offer agricultural producers some opportunities to capitalize on that cachet with perhaps a local label or some sort of terroir recognition that could be attached to products made in Prince Edward County.
Could be. down the road. They've got to get it going. Councillor Roberts?
I think I heard you say this, but I'm not sure. Did you say that United Counties of Prescott and Russell asked for a motion of support?
They asked for us to support the resolution is therefore be resolved. Prince Edward County Council supports the United Counties of Prescott and Russell and congratulates the municipality on this innovative project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any potential for, I mean, I'm trying to figure out if there's any relationship between this food hub and the food hub we've got, the county food hub. Did you have any conversations with them about maybe overflow or capacity issues?
This is a much larger enterprise than the Sophia.
For sure, 65 jobs, yes.
Yeah, and several $1 million in investment.
Okay.
So, Councillor Prinzen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity, support is basically just saying, yes, we support your idea. Is that what we're looking? I didn't see any financial numbers or anything. I just didn't want any surprises that a check went out. So thank you.
There are no surprises. There is no financial. This is just moral support. Okay. Yes, Councillor Maynard.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I'm going to ask the question that I think will be asked in the community. So, you know, it's fine Prescott Russell is going to have this food hub, but why not here? What are we doing? How come we're not netting something like this?
Well, we haven't put forward that initiative to undertake something in the way they have, but perhaps there's something we can learn.
Yeah, I mean, only because of the, you know, we've long talked about our agricultural roots and how we would like to leverage the production that does happen here.
Yep, I think there's an interesting learning opportunity here in the long term. Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, and we'll move to... Okay.
Prinz and Margetson, motion to extend this meeting.
Okay, all those in favor? That carries, so we'll move to committee reports, item 10.1. Could I have a mover and a seconder for this, please? Get seconder?
Go fast now. I'm in the groove. Let's go. 10-1.
Seconder? Councillor Hirsch?
Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a Prinz and Hirsch motion that the report of the committee of the whole from the meeting held on September 3rd, 2020 be adopted as presented.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions of the Zoom attendees? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? That carries. Item 10.2, mover and a seconder for this, please. Councillor Margetson, seconded by Councillor Bailey.
Margetson Bailey motion that the report of the Accessibility Advisory Committee from the meeting held on August 26, 2020 be adopted as presented.
Any questions? No, all those in favor? That carries. 10.3, Councillor Harper, seconded by Councillor Hirsch.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, it's a Harper-Hirsch motion that the report of the Traffic Advisory Committee be adopted as presented, that permanent digital speed monitors for Northport be referred to staff to be included in the 2021 budget deliberations. Staff be directed to investigate the request for a speed reduction and increased signage or lighting on Rednersville Road near the elementary school and provide a report at the next feasible Traffic Advisory Committee meeting. The staff be directed to investigate the request for a speed reduction on Chuckery Hill Road and provide a report at the next feasible Traffic Advisory Committee meeting. The staff be directed to investigate lowering the speed limit and adding a center line on Gilead Road and provide a report at the next feasible Traffic Advisory Committee meeting. And that staff be directed to investigate the request for a speed reduction on Massasauga Road and provide a report at the next feasible Traffic Advisory Committee meeting. And that the request for an all-way stop at Bark Street and Johnson Street or other traffic calming measures be referred to staff to evaluate and provide a report at the next feasible Traffic Advisory Committee meeting. That the Traffic Advisory Committee agrees and supports recommendations 3, 4, and 5 of Report DS-86/2020, and that recommendations 6, 7, 8, and 9 of the Report DS-86/2020 be referred back to staff for further investigation, including other parking options.
Okay. Questions? Councillor Maynard, then Councillor Hirsch.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate getting these minutes in a timely fashion and in front of us. I just, so now that these are here in front of us and the public gets a little better idea of seeing what's going on in these various committees, and especially this traffic committee, if they have a comment, they can just submit it through the clerk's office, because some of these are going to generate, you know, some, yes.
Through your worship, if I may, yes, that's correct. And this is fulfilling the motion that council passed in August, that the traffic committee review that DS-86 report. So it is my understanding that Peter's team will be bringing that report forward now that the traffic advisory committee has had a chance to comment.
So just for clarification, they're going back to the traffic committee though, correct?
The one through you, so they're
ahead.
coming back to committee of the whole with the report now that it's been examined by the traffic advisory committee.
For all of these items? No, just the last two, right?
Just the last two, yes, correct.
Okay. But I guess my question was how best for the public to weigh in on any of the other requests.
So they can contact clerks at pcounty.on.ca and they can provide a comment from the audience at any meeting, and also their comments can be circulated to the traffic advisory committee and the applicable staff.
And at that time, you'd be able to advise them when it would be on the traffic committee agenda.
Correct.
Thank you for the information.
Councillor Hirsch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kind of in the same vein, I really like this new process where the very specific items end up in front of us. And obviously now the public can be aware and can indeed, as Councillor Maynard suggested, have some input when these things come back to Traffic Advisory Committee. However, at that meeting, the Traffic Committee dealt with the agenda of the previous meeting, which was September 25th of last year, almost a year ago. And there are 8 other items which were supposed to be subject to staff reports that weren't discussed and don't seem to have any fate mentioned whatsoever. I could list them for you. 7 from the minutes of the September 25th, 2019 meeting. 7.1, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13 were concluded at that September 25th meeting as requiring a report from staff, and nothing has been forthcoming. So can we figure out a way that these are going to get into the scheme of things? 13 is dear to my heart, since it's a complaint from folks in South Marysburg that I had brought forward, and we still haven't had the results of staff's investigation. So I don't know how maybe staff has an idea on how these outstanding items get brought into the fold of the new traffic committee.
Madam Clerk.
So through your worship, we began an action tracking system, and we met prior to the first meeting in August. But there is a meeting coming up of the Traffic Advisory Committee on October 22nd, and we prioritize the items based on what needs to come forward, based on length of time, based on safety. So Peter and his team and myself and Mallory work together to bring items forward. So we are dealing with a bit of a backlog because the committee hadn't met for quite some time. So that will be coming forward, and I can share what items are slated to come forward to the next Traffic Advisory Committee as soon as we have that meeting with the chair, and that can be communicated to the rest of council if you're interested. So that way, if you would like to join the next Traffic Advisory Committee on October 22nd, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries, thank you. 10.4, Mover and a seconder for this, please. Councillor Margetson, seconded by Councillor Hirsch.
Thank you. This is a Margetson-Hurst motion that the report of the Heritage Advisory Committee from the meeting held on August 27th, 2020 and September 10th, 2020 be adopted as presented.
Thank you. Any questions? I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That carries. Item 10.5, mover and a seconder for this, please. Not everybody all at once. Councillor Hirsch, Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hirsch Harper motion that the report of the Environmental Advisory Committee from the meeting held on August 27th, 2020 be adopted as presented, that the Environmental Advisory Committee Planning Working Group be created, that the Water Security Working Group be created, and that the terms of reference for the Tree Working Group be amended to include a broader mandate.
Questions? I'm going to ask a question about the priorities of the and the status of that report, Madam CAO.
Through the mayor to the council, we are tracking to have a deputation with the chair of the Environmental Advisory Committee for the October 13th meeting. And you may recall at a previous meeting of the Environmental Advisory Committee, there was a motion that council passed related to the CAO reviewing the strategic priorities. So it is our intention on the 13th at council, there'll be the deputation by the chair on the strategic priorities, and then there'll also be an agenda item from the CAO reflecting the corporation's response to how we could support and implement the agenda as outlined in that strategic priorities.
So okay, so those haven't come forward for council, so aren't the working groups a little premature? Madam CAO, Madam Clerk.
I guess that's for council to decide. This is part of the agenda. We're only articulating the items that came forward from the various committees, and it's council's job to decide whether or not you support these items as written, see them needing to be amended, or would like to strike any.
Okay, I guess, well, for council consideration, the strategic priorities still have to be approved, so we've got cart before the horse here, in my view, but let's hear what some people on the committee have to say. Councilor McNaughton.
Thank you. So the strategic priorities have been identified. That doesn't necessarily mean that when the time comes to actually approve them at council, that council necessarily approves the working groups that are attached to each priority. So, but in the meantime, the people who have volunteered to spearhead the working group, developing the working group's terms of reference, are on deck and available to do that and just get some work done to be prepared for when that time does come. And they will have identified the skills required and the type of participants required per working group and the goals of the working group based on the strategic plan. So there are going to be ample opportunities for council to review at that time. This just lets people sort of hit the ground running and get some work done to prepare for that time. Also, there's really at this point nothing in any of our policies that require a strategic plan to be approved in advance of allowing people to just start doing some preliminary work.
Okay. Councillor St. Jean.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have the same concerns you do when it comes to nothing has come to council yet as far as strategic priorities. And it's beginning to sound like it's a fait accompli. But anyways, regardless of that, I want to compliment the Environmental Advisory Group for the amount of work they're taking on, oh my God. Like, I appreciate everything that's happening there. I do have a specific question, and I guess through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Hirsch, because it was his motion in the committee with regards to the formation of those Environmental Advisory Committee working groups. What is the intent? What is the scope of work that those working groups are going to undertake?
Well, I think
What is their focus?
Councillor Hirsch had his hand up and was probably going to explain this anyway.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, Mr.
Councillor
Mayor.
Hirsch.
Yes, I won't profess to be an expert on all of them, but one of the reasons, and we're not trying to put the cart before the horse, but we wish that the cart would catch up with the horse, because the horses are ready to move. We feel on the committee that there are some urgent issues facing the county that need work on an environmental basis. We're already in September of 2020, and it feels like we haven't gotten far enough, so we felt we needed to get some of these things going. So for instance, the planning working group, we recognize that there are some major applications before council at present that we will be dealing with shortly, that we think the EAC wants to provide some advice on. And so to do that, we kind of need to have a working group so that we can prepare some kind of a memo to come through the EAC to council to provide some advice on those planning applications. Similarly, for the tree working group, there was already the history of the ad hoc tree policy group from last year, and there's been a lot of work done with staff to get the tree policy in shape. So this group needs to get together, which includes most of the former members, so that that can happen. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, is to get the work going.
Okay. Follow up, Councillor St. Jean.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Hirsch, was there any thought given to at the EAC about what possible additional timelines the work of the committee? You stated that the EAC would be reviewing planning files. Is that going to add to the bureaucracy of Prince Edward County, or? It's an honest question, and I think it deserves an answer.
And the answer is no. The whole intention is to work within the existing planning timeframe, hence the urgency for getting some of these advice notes to council.
Okay, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps this is to John as well. The tree working group, does that include consideration or advocacy for an arborist?
To Councillor Roberts, yes, it will. First task is to get the tree policy as envisioned finalized and before council for approval. And I believe that part of the mandate, assuming that council ends up agreeing with the overall mandate of the Environmental Advisory Committee, will be to make suggestions concerning better ways to manage our natural cover. In fact, the working group is going to end up being called I think, the Natural Cover Working Group, more than just trees.
Okay, great.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Maynard.
Thank you. And I appreciate the work that has gone into this. My question is, we have a lot of committees, a lot of working groups, and not probably enough staff to provide support. So would these working groups be totally independent of any staff support?
I think Madam
Whoever
CAO.
would like to field that question.
Or Madam Clerk.
Through the mayor to Councillor Maynard, the way the terms of reference for the committees, all the committees got refreshed terms of reference this year. The way the terms of reference are structured is that the working groups are not supported by staff. Council endorsed those terms of references that have reference to the clerk's office supporting the actual advisory committee to council through minute taking and support in drafting motions, and that all committees, and if the committees ask us their working groups, can get sort of issue-specific support from staff. So if there is knowledge in one part of the organization or some research or information we can share to support the work. But the idea being that the working groups should be single task oriented and have an objective in mind and leverage volunteer capacity to grow what staff can provide to council through the committee. So they are not supported currently. You'll see in the next item, people disagree with that model, but that is what we have in place now. So the working groups would not be supported formally by staff, but I certainly see them, the more we have, the more they are looking for reports or information. Our experience with the working groups is that they also create work for the staff because we have something valuable to share, but it's usually more diverse across all departments. So we're trying to separate the previous model, which had committees and working groups very tied to a single department. So whatever support is necessary for council to get what it needs done, we will do that, but it'll be more county-wide in nature. But that doesn't mean we take the minutes or organize the meetings.
Okay, and if I could, just as a
follow-up?
Yes, as a follow-up, please. Is it common practice to have an environmental advisory committee commenting as on planning issues? Sorry.
We go
through the mayor to the.
Madam
So
CEO.
we did not. We did not do that research. I think anecdotally we know of examples in some cases. There's a legislative responsibility where certain aspects need to go to a committee from a planning perspective. That would include some matters related to heritage, for example, have a mandated responsibility to go to the committee. There is not that same mandated responsibility in the Planning Act for environment, but in some cases municipalities may structure that certain types of applications would filter through a committee if that's council's choice. At this point, there is nothing directing any planning files to go to the Environmental Advisory Committee. As I understand this working group model, they would like to identify planning projects and provide comment to council through the committee on a case-by-case basis.
And if I could, just really briefly, the terms of reference, a broader mandate, that's that term's a little broad. So I'm assuming that we're kind of at this point now approving them to continue on with this work. At what point will we see this broader mandate? Because trees, natural, what's the game plan here to bring it back to council?
Well, Councillor Hirsch may have some insight into this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, as the CEO said a little while ago, October 13th is when council gets to see and approve the complete strategy, which includes outlines for all these working groups and more. This is just the start. And just coming back on the planning question, our intention is only to look at at environmental aspects of planning, nothing else.
Not the whole. Okay, let's call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries. Item 10.6, mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Bailey, Councillor Roberts.
This is a Bailey-Roberts motion that the report of the Community and Economic Development Commission report be adopted as presented, that the CEDC supports and endorses the Healthcare Services Working Group terms of reference for council approval, that the CEDC endorses a request for staff support and applicable resources to the Healthcare Services Working Group, and that the CEDC supports and endorses the Food Security Working Group terms of reference for council approval.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Maynard.
Yeah, really quickly. So now we've got a vast array of working groups, some reporting directly to council, some going through the commission. How do we standardize this process?
Madam Clerk?
So through your worship, to the best of my knowledge, there are no working groups directly reporting to council. All working groups are reporting either through a committee or through the commission. The difference is that with these working groups, council directed in the July report with the CDC terms of reference that these working groups be created.
Any other questions? Any questions from Councillor Nyman or Councillor Bolick? No? Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That carries. Item 10.7, mover and a seconder for this, please. Councillor St. Jean and Councillor Hirsch.
Thank you, thank you, Your Worship. This is a St. Jean Hirsch motion that the report of the Audit Committee from the meeting held on September 16th, 2020 be adopted as presented. That the Audit Committee recommends the draft 2019 consolidated financial statements and trust fund financial statements for the Corporation of the County of Prince Edward for the year ended December 31st, 2019 as presented be approved by council, and that the audit findings report for the year ended December 31st, 2019 be received.
Questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries. 10.8, please. Mover and a seconder. I know it's been a long night, but if we could move along with the movers and seconders, it'll. Councillor Margetson and Councillor McNaughton.
It's a Margetson-McNaughton motion that the report of the Environmental Advisory Committee from the meeting held on September 10th be adopted as presented, that the Environmental Advisory Committee Agriculture and Food Security Working Group be created, that the Environmental Advisory Committee Funding and Financing Working Group be created, and that the Environmental Advisory Committee Communication and Engagement Working Group be created.
Questions? Madam Clerk.
So through your worship, part of my job is to ensure that good decision-making is occurring by council, and I want to point out that one of the proposed working groups, which you don't have a terms of reference in front of you, so you don't really know the scope of the work that these working groups are going to do, that is very similar to the one that you just approved being the food security. So we don't want to duplicate efforts and have too many working groups working on projects or tasks that the Environmental Advisory Committee may be given them, and it may go against another working group that council created. And that would be the first one, the agriculture and food security. And also this is a new process with the working groups for all of us. And the only working group that we've created prior to this night tonight was the Sir John A. Macdonald Working Group through the Heritage Advisory Committee. And the process we followed for that was a terms of reference was brought forward to you as council, and you knew exactly what you were creating. With the terms of references for the working groups that you created under the CEDC, in front of you were those terms of references. So you knew what the working groups want, you know what they want to accomplish. With the Environmental Advisory Committee working groups, and I totally get where they're coming from, they want to get to work, they want to get started, have people assigned to these working groups, and perhaps those members of the committee want to create the terms of reference for these working groups. But I just caution you from creating all these working groups when you don't really know what they want to accomplish, except for one sentence. So I just want to say that. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about other members of council. I'm looking forward to the report coming from the CAO. But we've got a multitude of working groups here. I don't know how. Anyway, Councillor McNaughton.
So I will just, so there will be obviously an opportunity to review and to look at terms of references as they roll out. So, but these do all relate to the strategic goals as stated that will come to you. They all, what seems like an overlap in this case is just the trick of a name. The group hasn't even established a name, which will likely be a research group that is dedicated to understanding food sovereignty and its environmental impacts. So it's more about improving, like, sort of best practice for potentially, I think where it's going is going to be best practice for improving soil health, for example. So it's really very specific to environmental concerns. However, that is for that group to work out in the terms of reference and then bring forward, and then there's an opportunity for council to step back or support at that time, or suggest that they connect with the other group if it seems like there is truly an overlap, which I don't believe there will be.
Okay. Any other questions about this? Councillor St. Jean.
Thank you, Your Worship. After hearing our clerk's explanation, I'm a little concerned that we're actually creating something that we have no idea specifically what it is we're creating. So I'm going to make a motion to amend, if I could get a seconder, to delete the three sentences with regards to all three being created, because we don't know what we're creating. I cannot support that.
I'll second it.
Okay. All right, questions? Councillor Forster?
You know, I'm really concerned, Mr. Mayor, is that we're creating all these working groups. And everybody brings in all this input, and we can't deal with all this input, and we can't make decisions because we can't fund it or it can't go that direction. Then everybody gets very frustrated. Then they quit one at a time, and we've seen this with a lot of other committees. And we're just creating committee after committee after committee. It's mind-boggling.
All right, anybody else speaking to the motion or Councillor St. Jean's amendment?
Councillor Nyman?
Councillor Nyman? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll second that motion if nobody else has of Councillor St. Jean's.
No, it's already done.
It's already been seconded?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Maynard.
To be clear, because this is a different format than we're looking at, this is not just approving the minutes. This is actually giving them the go-ahead to create these working committees without the without the background information. So I guess that means that what we did under 10.5 is
10.5 and 10.6.
yeah.
Yes. Correct.
So that one's already done, right? 10.5.
That's done.
And through you, Your Worship, as Councillor McNaughton said, you know, it is the expectation that these groups come back with terms of references, but
that doesn't say that.
It would be, the motion isn't clear in saying that, and also too, it's just like Mayor Ferguson said, kind of putting the cart before the horse.
So so is the solution then to just amend it that that after it says the working group, terms of reference be returned to council for ratification, or what's the, how do we get ourselves out of this?
Councillor St. Jean has put something on the floor.
My motion was to delete those three sentences in the motion and simply just receive the or no, I guess it's the report of the Environmental Advisory Committee from the meeting held on September 10, 2020 be adopted as presented. Delete the final three. That's, and I apologize, I should ask for the same thing on the previous motion.
Okay, well, we're past that one. Councillor Hirsch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just speak briefly to the motion and with a bit of an explanation. the idea of these working groups was not our invention. This is part of the new strategy that the clerk's office has put together. What we're faced with on the Environmental Advisory Committee is that when council sought membership in the committee, we received over 30 applications from very well-qualified people. So some 20 of those are left out there that we'd like to invite to help the committee on some working groups. But we can't do that unless we have working groups established, so then we can send out invitations. So it's, I don't know if it's the cart before the horse, or we have more carts or more horses, but we got to get people doing this work, and the only way to do it is like this. And as Councillor McNaughton said, there will be terms of reference coming to you. Again, not our idea, but we have to do it, so we're going to do it.
Okay, Councillor Bailey.
I simply want to emphasize what Councillor Hirsch just said. We have a group of extremely talented, very earnest people who want to do something. And this seemed at the time to be the best way to give them a sense of direction and a purpose. And if we can't do it officially yet, they can at least take their expertise and start looking at things that they might do should they be in these working groups. I'd hate to think that any of these folks become disenchanted and just completely walk away, because we would be losing substantial talent if that happened.
Okay. We've got Councillor St. Jean's, who seconded your motion? Councillor Forrester.
Oh,
Madam Clerk, can you read that?
Moved by Councillor St. Jean, seconded by Councillor Forrester, that the report of the Environmental Advisory Committee from the meeting held on September 10th, 2020 be adopted as presented.
Okay, we'll vote on this. All those in favor? Hands up, please.
So to be clear, what you're voting on is not deleting the other three clauses.
Okay.
No, I was going to ask that because those three clauses are part of the report that's being presented, correct?
Correct. So it really should be that they be received for information.
They'd be what? Sorry?
Received for information.
Okay. So are you comfortable with that? Comfortable with that? Everybody clear on that change of language? Okay, I'll call the vote on that. Please, all those in favor? Received as information?
7.
Where are we?
7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Nyman?
8. 9.
9. Okay. So that moves us to 10, there we are, 10.9. Mover and a seconder for this, please. Councillor McMahon and Councillor Prinzen.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a McMahon-Prinzen motion that the report of the Police Services Board from the meeting held on September the 2nd, 2020 be adopted as presented, and that the Chief Building and Bylaw Official, with the recommendation from the Prince Edward County OPP Detachment, provide a report to Council outlining the need and adoption of a false alarm bylaw.
Okay. Questions? I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries. Item 1010, CFRB. Mover and a seconder, Councillor McNaughton, seconded by Councillor Hirsch.
This is the McNaughton-Hirsch motion that the report of the Museum Advisory Committee from the meeting held on September 9th, 2020 be adopted as presented.
Questions? Councillor St. Jean.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to any one of the museum I guess that would be you, wouldn't it, Councillor McNaughton? With regards to item 6.2, what was the answer? With regards to the if the Rose House Museum Working Group were to disband, what would happen with their funds? There's no mention of what the answer was, just that there was a discussion.
So funds raised under the auspices of raising money for a particular institution. So, for example, if the Friends of the Rose House volunteers were raising money on behalf of using the Rose House as the recipient, or activities within the Rose House as the recipient, there's a legal constraint on those funds, and that they have to be used on for the purposes under which they were raised. Is that
No, with
answering?
regards to if they were to disband, what happens to their funds? That's what that discussion apparently was about?
Yes, they would. Well, the funds would remain attached to the Rose House. That's pretty much the result of that conversation. Okay. So, and there is a terms of reference that specifically states that for the volunteers for the Rose House, and I believe they're in agreement with the terms.
Okay. No, I asked that question because there wasn't a lot of clarity there, and it has the potential to impact all of our museum properties, those that have Friends.
Yes, it does.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries. Item 11, bylaws for consideration. Mover and a seconder for this, please. Councillor Maynard, seconded by Councillor McNaughton. You just have to cite the numbers, Councillor Maynard.
With that reminder, I could do it to you. That's why I put my hand up. That the following bylaws be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. 11.1.1, 11.1.2, 11.1.3, 11.1.4, 11.1.5, 11.1.6, 11.1.7, and 11.1.8.
Any questions? Okay, all those in favor? That carries. Confirmatory bylaw, please. Councillor Prinzen, seconded by Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a Prince Harper motion that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. A bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the County of Prince Edward, the meeting held on September 22nd, 2020.
Thank you. All those in favor? That carries. Adjournment. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Margetson, seconded by Councillor Bailey.
Margetson Bailey motion that this meeting now adjourn at 10:44 p.m.
Thank you. All those in favor? No one's going to object. Thank you very much.